Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. You are standing in a corridor that smells of dried mugwort and pine resin, and it is not yet dawn. There is a king behind one of these walls. He is sick. He is always in some way sick. That is why you are here. You have never spoken directly to him. You are not permitted to. There is a man for that, a senior physician, and he will speak for you, and you will work through his hands and his words, and the king will never know your name. But the king's pulse, you know. You have felt it through a silk cloth laid over his wrist, because even that, a woman's fingers against royal skin, is a thing that must be negotiated by protocol. You know whether his pulse is flooding or thin. You know whether it skips. You know things about this man's body that his ministers do not know, that his generals do not know. And you are 24 years old, and you are not allowed to be in the same room as him without permission granted by 4 separate offices of the palace. This is what it is to be a royal court physician in medieval Korea. Before the city wakes, you wake. Before the palace breathes, you are already inside it, already moving, already counting. You count the days since the king's last fever. You count the vials in your case. Dried ginger root, coptis root. Prepared aconite in measured doses, because aconite heals and aconite kills, and the line between them is a question of weight and timing and how well you slept the night before. You think about the crown prince. He has been coughing for 6 days, a dry cough, not productive, which tells you something. You noted it. You always note it. The palace keeps records of everything, and you are part of what the palace records, your assessments folded into the official medical logs that will outlast all of you. The king, the prince, the court, every physician who ever pressed a finger to a royal wrist and tried to understand what it meant. There is a woman in the East Wing who has been bleeding for 11 days. She is one of the king's consorts. You were called to her 3 times this week. You brought her mugwort and prepared it yourself, and you sat with her in the dark because there was no one else to sit with her, and you are the only person in this palace whose presence is both medically necessary and socially acceptable in that room. That is what a court physician is in this kingdom, in this century. You are necessary in places where no one else is permitted. You know things that must never leave these walls. In a few minutes, the kitchen will begin the first food tasting of the day. Someone will eat a portion of the king's breakfast before it is brought to him. They will wait. If they are still standing after a measured interval, the food will proceed. You have stood in that kitchen. You have watched the tasters. You understand that the taster's life is not valued less than the king's life. It is valued differently. It is a different kind of value, the kind that is held in the body rather than the title. You have thought about this. You have also thought about the fact that aconite, in the right preparation, takes 20 minutes to show symptoms, which is longer than the standard tasting interval. You have thought about this, and you have kept the thought to yourself, because that is another thing a court physician learns. Some knowledge is kept in the body. Some knowledge is never written down. The corridor is cold. The stone floor is cold even through your shoes. The candles along the wall are spaced exactly 2 arm lengths apart, and you know this because you have measured them, because measuring things is how you understand the world. and the world inside this palace is the only world you have been permitted to inhabit for the last 7 years. You were 12 years old when they came for you. Not came for you the way soldiers come, came for you the way administrators come, with papers and a measured look and a list of names, and yours was on it. That is how it begins for a court physician in this kingdom. They come for the daughters of the lowest families first. This is quiet history at bedtime. If this is your kind of story, a subscribe means everything right now. Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. Your name is Sori. You are 24 years old. You have been a court physician, an euinyeo, for 7 years. You entered the palace training program at 12, which is the standard entry age for girls selected from the Chungyeon and Nobi classes, the middle and servant classes, the families who own little and are owed less. You did not choose this. No one asked if you wanted to be chosen. A government physician came through your county in the spring of your 12th year. He carried a list of criteria and a set of simple tests. Could you read? Could you write? Could you follow a sequence of instructions without losing your place? Were your hands steady? Were you in good health? No obvious defects of sight or hearing? You passed. Passing meant leaving. You were taken to the training school in the capital, where you joined 40 other girls from similar backgrounds, and for the next 3 years you were taught to read Chinese medical texts, to memorize the names and properties of 300 medicinal substances, to grind, measure, and prepare herbal formulas, to take a pulse in the classical manner, to use silver needles for acupuncture, and to conduct gynecological examinations that no male physician could legally perform on a woman of standing. That last part is the reason you exist. In Joseon, the Confucian prohibition against physical contact between men and women is strict enough that male court physicians cannot examine female patients of the upper classes. They cannot touch them. They can ask questions through a screen or through an intermediary, but they cannot lay hands on a noblewoman, a queen, or a consort. So the palace trains women to do what the men cannot. You are the solution to a problem that Confucian law created. You are also officially a servant. Your social rank has not changed because of your training. You are classified as a government slave, a guanbi, and you receive a small government stipend and 2 sets of official clothing per year. And you live in the quarters attached to the Royal Medical Bureau, the Naiwan, along with 11 other physicians at your level. The Naiwan is the oldest continuous medical institution in the kingdom. It was established in 1392, within a year of the founding of the Joseon Dynasty, because the dynasty understood from the beginning that keeping the royal family alive was a matter of state security, not personal comfort. The Bureau employs 30 senior male physicians, 12 physicians of your rank, 6 pharmacists, 2 record keepers, and 1 bureau director who reports directly to the Ministry of Personnel. Everything that happens in this building is written down. The morning begins the same way every morning. You rise before the 4th watch bell, which marks the hour before dawn. In the winter months, the sky outside the small, high window of your quarters is still completely dark. You dress in the dark because you have done it enough times that light is no longer necessary. Your uniform is a plain white jagori, a short jacket, over a dark skirt. Over this you wear the outer robe that marks your status within the bureau. There is nothing decorative about your clothing. That is deliberate. Decoration signals rank and desire, and you are not permitted to signal either in the spaces where you work. You tie your hair in the manner required. You wash your face with cold water from the basin that was filled the night before. The water is cold enough to make your teeth ache. You drink a small cup of warm barley tea that you have kept under a cloth to preserve some heat. This is breakfast. You will not eat again until the midday distribution from the palace kitchen, which comes at the hour of the horse, roughly noon. You pick up your physician's case. The case is made of lacquered wood and fits under your arm. Inside, arranged in a specific order that you can reproduce by touch, 12 vials of powdered and dried medicinal substances, a roll of silk thread used for measuring pulse points, 3 silver needles in a sealed bamboo tube, a small ceramic ink block, and 2 brushes for writing case notes, a folded cloth of clean linen, and a copy of the day's patient schedule written in your own hand the night before. The schedule is important. Deviation from it requires written justification filed with the bureau office before the end of the day. You have filed 6 justifications in the past month because illness does not follow schedules. You step out of your quarters into the corridor. The corridor runs along the inner wall of the Neuinyeo compound. At this hour it is lit by oil lamps placed in iron brackets, and the smell of the lamp oil mixes with the ambient smell of the medical bureau, which is a smell unlike anything outside these walls. Dried roots, fermented herbal preparations, the faint mineral sharpness of acupuncture needles, and underneath it all, the smell of coal smoke from the heating channels that run beneath the stone floor. The Andol system, the underfloor heating, has been burning since the second watch. The stone is warm beneath your feet. In a country where winter temperatures drop to the point that ink freezes in its well, the Andol is not a comfort. It is a requirement. Cold hands cannot take a pulse accurately. You keep your hands inside your robe as you walk. At the end of the corridor, you turn right toward the preparation room. The preparation room is where the day's medicines are made. 3 other physicians are already here when you arrive. You nod to each of them. You do not speak yet. The preparation room has a protocol. Work begins before conversation. This is not a written rule. It is a practiced one, learned from the physicians who trained you, and before them from the physicians who trained them. You go to your station, a low table with a grinding stone, a set of brass measuring cups, and a clay brazier for heating water. You open your case and take out the day's first prescription slip. The slip is a small rectangle of paper, about the size of your palm, written in the neat official hand of the senior physician who authorized it. It lists the patient, the formula, the dosage, and the time of administration. Patient, the Crown Prince. Formula, a modified version of the classic cough formula, Joseon, with an added measure of fritillaria bulb to address what you have classified as heat accumulation in the lung meridian. The Crown Prince has been coughing for 6 days. You assessed him yourself 2 days ago. through the standard protocol for male royal patients. You were not in the room with him. You were in the adjacent room, and you passed your written observations to the senior physician who sat with the prince, and he incorporated your assessment into his diagnosis. This is the standard arrangement. You grind the fritillaria bulb first. It is pale and slightly bitter smelling. You measure it against the brass cup, level the surface with a straight edge, and transfer the powder to the clay preparation bowl. 3 other ingredients follow in sequence: dried tangerine peel, roasted licorice root, platycadon root, each measured, each recorded in your case log. You add water that has been heated to just below boiling, a temperature you judge by the size of the bubbles that form on the surface of the clay pot. Large bubbles mean too hot, fine threads of movement at the bottom, not yet reached temperature. The right moment is when small bubbles form and rise continuously. You have made this judgment hundreds of times. You add the water and set the bowl on the brazier. The decoction will take 40 minutes. You set the timing by a water clock mounted on the wall of the preparation room, a ceramic vessel with a calibrated drip rate that marks the quarters of each hour. While you wait, you prepare the second formula. This one is for the consort in the east wing. She has been bleeding irregularly for 11 days, and the formula you are preparing is a warming formula designed to tonify what the classical texts call the thoroughfare vessel and the conception vessel, 2 of the primary meridians governing female reproductive function. The formula contains dried mugwort prepared as a compressed cone for moxa, plus an internal formula of processed Romania root, dong quai, and ginger. You grind the Ruthmania root. It is dark, almost black, after processing, and it smells faintly sweet and earthy. The processing, which involves steaming the raw root 9 times and drying it 9 times, changes its properties from cold to warm in classical theory. And in your clinical experience, there is something to this. You have seen the unprocessed root cause digestive upset in patients with weak digestion. You have seen the processed root tolerated much better by the same patients. You do not know the mechanism. No one does in the framework available to you. But you know the pattern, and patterns in this work are worth more than theories. This is something your teacher told you in your first year of training. Patterns, Sori. Trust patterns before you trust explanations. You trust patterns. You have been observing the consort's pattern for 11 days. The bleeding is not constant. It comes and goes, heavier in the mornings, lighter by afternoon. It responds slightly to warmth, which is why you added more ginger to the formula this morning than you used yesterday. You are adjusting based on daily observation. The senior physician signed off on the formula modification without comment, which means he agrees with your reasoning, or at least does not disagree enough to override it. The water clock marks the first quarter. You check the Crown Prince's decoction. The liquid has reduced slightly and taken on a pale amber color. It smells of tangerine peel, which is the dominant scent note in this formula. You stir it twice with a bamboo utensil and return it to the heat. Behind you, one of the other physicians begins to speak. She is reporting on her overnight patient, a senior court lady who developed a fever in the second watch. Her voice is quiet and precise. She names the symptoms. She names the formula she administered. She states the current condition. You listen while you work. This is how information passes between you in the morning. There is no formal meeting. There is the preparation room, and the work, and the voices that move alongside the work. Outside, you can hear the palace beginning to move. The sound arrives in layers. First, the distant sound of the palace gates opening for the morning delivery of food and supplies. Then the sound of footsteps on stone, the servants beginning their routes. Then voices, low and purposeful, not yet fully woken. By the time the city outside these walls has come fully awake, you will have already completed 3 hours of work. The water clock marks the second quarter. You lift the crown prince's decoction from the brazier and strain it through a layer of cloth into a clean ceramic cup. The liquid is amber and slightly fragrant. You set it aside to cool to the correct serving temperature, which you judge by holding the outside of the cup against the inside of your wrist. Not burning. Warm enough to feel against skin. That is the correct temperature. You wrap the cup in a cloth to hold the heat and place it in the carrying case designated for royal deliveries. The carrying case is sealed with a paper band that you press and smooth flat with your thumb. The paper band has your name written on it, and the name of the senior physician who authorized the formula, and the time of preparation. This is also the chain of accountability. If the prince's condition worsens after taking this medicine, these names will be examined. If there is an adverse effect, the paper band is the first document that will be reviewed. You have thought about this every time you press your name to a royal carrying case, which is most mornings of most weeks. You have also thought about the fact that the medicine is correct. You are confident in that. You ground the ingredients yourself, measured them yourself, prepared the water yourself. The formula is sound. The dosage is appropriate. Confidence and accountability are not the same thing, but in this work you carry both, and you have learned to carry them without letting either one pull you off balance. One of the other physicians calls across the room. The senior physician is here. You turn. He is a man of about 50, with a precise gray-streaked topknot and the blue outer robe that marks his position as a third-tier court official. His name is Physician Im. You have worked alongside him for 4 years. He does not use your name in professional settings, which is the standard arrangement. You are addressed by your role rather than your name in most formal contexts, though he uses your name when the two of you discuss a difficult case without witnesses. He looks at the carrying case. "Ready?" he says. "Ready," you say. He nods. He picks up his own case. He is carrying the logbook for the morning rounds, which he will write in throughout the day, recording each patient visit in the format required by the bureau. Date, patient name and status, presenting condition, formula prescribed, physician present, observations. The logbook is the most important document in this building. It is reviewed monthly by the bureau director. It is reviewed quarterly by an inspector from the Ministry of Personnel. It is stored in a fireproof archive at the end of each year. If you want to understand what happened inside this palace medically over the last 150 years, you go to the archive. The record of every fever, every difficult birth, every death that had medical involvement is there. You are part of what the archive records. You follow Physician Im out of the preparation room and into the corridor that leads toward the inner palace. The corridor passes through 3 gates. each requiring a different level of access. At the first gate, a guard checks Physician M's credentials and notes the time of entry in his own log. At the second gate, your carrying case is inspected. The guard lifts the cloth, looks at the sealed cup, notes the paper band, replaces the cloth. At the third gate, both of you are checked against a list of personnel authorized for inner palace access that morning. This is the standard procedure. It takes 12 minutes, which you know because you have timed it. The inner palace is quieter than the outer compound. The paths are swept stone, clean enough that you can see the grain in the granite. The buildings here are larger, with more complex roof lines. The curved eaves of the main halls reaching higher, the painted wooden beams more elaborate. You have been coming here for 9 years, and you still look at the roof lines. The Crown Prince's quarters are in the eastern section of the inner palace, in a compound called the Donggung. The Eastern Palace, which is the traditional residence of the heir apparent and his household. The compound has its own staff, its own kitchen, its own small library, and its own protocol separate from, though connected to, the king's court. The Crown Prince is 14 years old. He has been studying for 8 hours a day under the supervision of 3 royal tutors since he was 8. He reads classical Chinese, composes poetry in the Tang style, practices calligraphy, studies history and governance texts, and attends daily lectures on ritual protocol. In the 2 hours between his afternoon study session and his evening study session, he is permitted to practice archery in the inner courtyard or play baduk, the board game. He is 14, and his schedule allows him 2 hours of something he has chosen. You know this because the schedule is part of the patient file, and the patient file tells you what his days look like. You have assessed 14-year-old boys for coughs before, outside the palace, in your early training when you were occasionally sent to evaluate patients in the city. Those boys coughed because of cold air and inadequate clothing and rooms without ondol heating. They recovered within a week if you gave them something warming and sent them back to bed. The Crown Prince is coughing for different reasons. He is kept warm. He is well fed. His rooms are heated. He is coughing because he is 14 and under relentless pressure, and his body is choosing this particular expression of whatever is accumulating in him. You have not written this in any case file. You think it, and you treat the cough correctly, and you keep the thought where thoughts like this belong. Inside the Donggung Gate, you and Physician M are met by the Crown Prince's personal chamberlain, a man named Steward Choi, who has managed the prince's household for 9 years and who views all medical personnel with the specific suspicion of someone who considers himself the primary authority on the prince's well-being. He looks at your carrying case. He looks at Physician M. He says, "The prince had a difficult night." Physician M says, "Please describe the night." Steward Choi says, "The cough woke him twice. He could not return to sleep before the 4th watch. He is tired." You write this down in your case log. Disrupted sleep, cough active at night, onset before 4th watch. This is clinically significant. Night cough with heat presentation means the cooling of the body during sleep is being disrupted by something that classical theory classifies as yin deficiency, a failure of the body's cooling mechanism to keep pace with its warming mechanism. You adjust your mental assessment slightly. The fritillaria dosage was correct. You also make a note to suggest adding white mulberry leaf to tomorrow's formula. Physician M nods at your note. He has seen you make it. He will review it later. You follow Steward Choi into the prince's receiving room. The prince is not in the receiving room. He is in the inner room, still in his sleeping clothes, which is unusual. Under normal circumstances, he would have dressed before the medical visit. The fact that he has not dressed tells you the night was harder than Steward Choi indicated. You remain in the receiving room. This is the arrangement. Physician M goes into the inner room to assess the prince directly, and you wait here, and when he comes out he will describe what he observed, and you will ask questions if you have them, and together you will adjust the treatment plan. You wait. You can hear faintly the sounds of the morning, servants moving in the corridor outside, the distant sound of the food delivery arriving at the kitchen gate, a bird somewhere in the courtyard garden. Physician M comes out of the inner room after about 10 minutes. He sits across from you and opens the logbook. He says, "Pulse is floating and rapid. Tongue shows some redness at the tip. Cough is dry. No sputum. Slight hoarseness this morning." You say, "The hoarseness is new." He says, "Yes." The hoarseness changes the picture slightly. You think for a moment. Hoarseness combined with dry cough and heat signs points toward the lung and the throat, which in classical theory share a relationship, and the presence of heat in that region suggests the formula needs a small modification. You suggest add peppermint, small quantity, for the throat, and increase the platycodon slightly to open the lung. Physician M considers this. He says, "Agreed. Prepare the modified formula for tomorrow. Today's decoction stands." You make the note. The decoction will be administered now through Steward Choi, who will bring it to the prince in the inner room. The prince will drink it alone or with Steward Choi present, depending on his preference. You will not see the prince drink it. You hand the carrying case to Steward Choi. He takes it with both hands, which is the correct form of receipt for a medical delivery. He looks at the paper band with your name on it. He looks at you for a moment. Then he turns and goes into the inner room. You pick up your case. You follow Physician M back out into the courtyard. The next patient is across the inner palace in the west wing in a separate compound. You walk. The inner palace in the morning light. The pale winter sun, just beginning to clear the roof lines, is a place of extraordinary organization. The paths connect specific buildings in specific sequences. The gates align the sight lines. The layout was designed to express hierarchy through geometry. The king's quarters at the center, everything else arranged in relation to that center. Each degree of distance from the center corresponding to a degree of distance from power. You have walked these paths for 9 years. You know where every gate is, where every building is, which compounds require which credentials. You know which paths are used by servants and which by officials, and which, on specific ceremonial days, are swept clean and left empty because they are designated for the king's passage and no one else may use them. You know this palace the way you know a patient's body. By its patterns, by its rhythms, by the things it expresses and the things it does not. Physician M is walking slightly ahead of you. reading from the logbook as he walks, reviewing the morning's remaining patient list. He says, without turning, "The consort in the east wing. Has there been any change?" You say the bleeding was lighter yesterday evening, responding to the warming formula, but the pattern is not resolved. She needs at least 10 more days of treatment. He says, "I will note it." You say, "She is frightened." He says nothing for a moment. Then, yes, she would be. He turns a page in the logbook. The east wing is ahead. You know, and Physician M knows, and everyone in the Bureau knows, that the consort's situation is complicated by more than medicine. A consort who bleeds for weeks at a time and cannot produce an heir is a consort whose position in the palace is unstable. The medicine you are giving her addresses the physical symptom. No medicine addresses the political dimension of it. You do not say this. Physician M does not say this. You both walk toward the east wing in the cold morning air, your breath forming small visible clouds, the stone path firm and cold and familiar beneath your feet. The east wing compound is smaller than the Donggung. The buildings are single-story, with plain white walls and modest painted trim. The consort's quarters are at the back of the compound, past a small courtyard with a plum tree that is in this cold, bare and gray. A senior lady attendant meets you at the door. She bows to Physician M. To you, she says, quietly, she asked for you specifically this morning. This is not unusual. The consort has come to trust you in the way that patients sometimes trust the person who sits with them in the dark, the person who checks on them before the rest of the world is awake. Trust formed in illness is a particular kind of trust. Physician M says, "I will wait here." You go in. The room is warm and faintly smoky from the sleeping brazier. The consort is lying on a low pallet, covered by a layered silk quilt. She is perhaps 20 years old, with a round face and eyes that are tired in a specific way, the tiredness of someone who has been afraid for a long time. She looks at you when you enter. She says nothing. She extends her wrist. You kneel beside her and place a folded cloth across her wrist. You rest 3 fingers on the cloth, arranged in the classical pulse-taking position. Index finger nearest the wrist crease, middle finger at the guan position, ring finger at the qi position. You close your eyes. The pulse is thin but present, less rapid than yesterday. There is something in the qi position that was not there 2 days ago, a quality the texts describe as slightly slippery, which is a pulse associated with the lower abdomen and with the condition you are treating. You open your eyes. You say, "It is improving." She looks at you. You say, "The bleeding will not stop immediately, but the pattern is changing." She says, "How do you know?" You say, "Your pulse. It is different from Monday." She says, "You remember my pulse from Monday?" You say, "Yes." She is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "Are you cold?" You say, "The room is warm." She says, "Your hands are cold." You say, "I walked across the compound." She nods. She keeps her wrist extended. Even though you have finished taking the pulse, you do not withdraw your hand. You sit with her for a few more minutes. This is not in the official protocol. There is no written instruction that says, sit with the patient after the clinical assessment is complete. There is no rule against it either. There is simply the reality that some patients need something that is not in the formula, something that is not in the needle, something that sits in the space between the medical visit and the door. You have learned over 7 years that this is also medicine. You do not write it in the logbook. But you do not leave until she has settled back against the quilt, and her breathing has slowed, and she looks, not healed, but slightly less alone than when you came in. Then you rise. You bow. You go back out into the cold. Physician Im is waiting by the plum tree. He looks at you. He says nothing. You say she is improving. I will prepare this morning's formula and send it by the midday distribution. He makes the note. You walk back toward the outer compound. The sun is higher now. The cold is still sharp, but the quality of the light has changed. The palace is fully awake. Servants are moving between buildings with purpose. In the distance, from the direction of the throne hall, you can hear the faint sound of drums marking the beginning of the morning court session, the daejeon, where the king meets with his ministers. The king is in that room right now. He is sitting on the throne that sits on a raised platform in the hall called Gyunjungjung, which translates roughly as the Hall of Diligent Governance. The throne is a lacquered wooden chair with a tall back and armrests carved in the form of dragons. Behind the throne hangs a painted screen showing the sun, the moon, and 5 mountains. The Erwalabongdo, a painting that has hung behind every Joseon king's throne since the dynasty was founded. The king faces south. All the important things in this palace face south. His ministers are arranged before him in 2 rows, civil officials on the east, military officials on the west. Each row organized by rank from closest to the throne, highest rank, to farthest, lowest rank. Each official wears the robe appropriate to his rank, the color and pattern regulated by sumptuary law, which means the law that controls who is permitted to wear what. You are not in that room. You are not permitted in that room. But you have treated the men who are in that room. You have pressed your fingers to the pulses of court officials who sat within 10 steps of the throne. You have prepared formulas for men whose words, spoken in that hall, determine the fates of thousands. You walk past the outer wall of the Gyunjungjun and hear the drums stop. The morning session has begun. You return to the Naiwewan. There is more work waiting. There is always more work. You set down your case at your station in the preparation room and begin to grind the herbs for the consort's midday formula. The grinding stone is cold. Your hands are cold. You warm them briefly against the sides of the clay brazier before you begin. The herb under the stone is processed Rehmannia, dark and dense and faintly sweet. You push the stone forward. You begin again. The formula for the consort takes 30 minutes to prepare correctly. You do not rush it. In the Naiwewan, rushing a preparation is considered a form of negligence. The grinding stone must travel the full length of the stroke. The measuring cups must be leveled twice, not once. The water temperature must be correct before the herbs go in, not approximately correct, and there is a difference between the two that you can feel in your wrist when you hold the clay pot. Your teacher told you this in the first year. A physician who hurries the preparation room is telling the patient that their time is worth less than the physician's convenience. You do not hurry. The preparation room around you is busy now. The morning has reached the hour when all the day's morning formulas are being completed, and the medical staff are moving between stations, sharing instruments, calling out ingredient names, checking each other's measurements. There is a specific sound to this hour, low voices and ceramic against stone and the hiss of water at temperature, and after years in this building you would know it with your eyes closed. You finish the consort's formula and seal it in the carrying case. You write the paper band. You set it in the tray designated for the midday delivery. Then you pull your case log toward you and review the morning. The Crown Prince, cough, heat presentation, modified formula for tomorrow. Note to add white mulberry leaf and increase platicodon. The consort, bleeding improving, pulse shifting. Continue warming formula. Review in 3 days. There are 4 more entries on today's schedule. 2 of them are standard monitoring visits, senior court ladies with ongoing conditions that you have been managing for several months. 1 is a new referral, a younger attendant in the Queen's household who has been complaining of headaches for 2 weeks. 1 is a joint assessment with physician M, a case he has flagged as requiring both a senior male physician and a female court physician, which means the patient is a woman of high status. You look at the last entry. The name is not written. That is unusual. Normally, the patient name is written in full. When it is not written, it means the patient's identity is sensitive. You consider this. You make no notation. You close the log. You pick up your case and go to find Physician M. He is in his office at the end of the Naiwan corridor, a small room with a low desk, a shelf of reference texts, and a single oil lamp. He is writing in the master log when you knock on the doorframe. He looks up. He says, "The 4th watch assessment this morning. The new referral." You say, "I saw the blank entry." He says, "It is the 2nd consort. She has requested a private assessment. The Queen's office approved it this morning." The 2nd consort is a woman in her late 20s who joined the palace household 3 years ago. She is not the king's primary consort, but she has produced 1 living child, a daughter. Her position in the palace is not as precarious as the consort you treated this morning, but it is not secure either. You say, "What is the presenting complaint?" He says, "She would not tell the referral physician. She will only speak to a female physician." You say, "I will go this afternoon." He nods. He returns to the log. You leave his office. The morning monitoring visits take until late in the hour of the snake, which is roughly 10 in the morning. These are straightforward. The first court lady has a chronic pain condition in her lower back, something you have been treating for 6 months with a combination of acupuncture and a warming formula. Her condition is stable. You replace 3 needles, add a moxa application, and reassess the formula. No changes needed. The second monitoring visit is for a senior lady attendant who developed edema, swelling of the lower legs, 8 weeks ago. This is a condition associated with prolonged standing, which is most of what she does, combined with what you assess as kidney qi deficiency based on pulse and the additional symptom of low back fatigue. The formula you have her on is slightly modified today based on the season. Winter requires more warming agents. You add a small increase in cinnamon bark to the formula and instruct her to reduce the amount of time she stands in cold corridors. She says, "My duties require that I stand in cold corridors." You say, "I understand. Do what you can." She nods. You note the exchange in the log. It is the kind of note that no one will ever read carefully, but it tells the truth. You gave clinically appropriate advice, and the patient gave a clinically appropriate answer, which is that the conditions of her life do not always allow for the conditions recommended by her physician. This is the reality of palace medicine. You treat people whose lives are not their own. The new referral, the young attendant with headaches, is in the outer quarters of the Queen's household. You walk there through the middle compound, through 2 gates, past the outer kitchen where you can smell the preparation of the midday meals. The palace kitchen system is one of the most complex organizational structures in Joseon. The main royal kitchen, the Sori, operates separately from the kitchens of the various household compounds. The Sori handles the king's meals, called the surasang, the royal table, and operates under a system of checks that you know better than most people outside the kitchen itself, because some of those checks involve the euinyeo. The king's table is prepared by a team of specialist cooks working under the supervision of a head cook who reports to a court lady of senior rank called a sangun. The Sori employs approximately 50 people for the preparation of the king's 3 daily meals, though in practice the surasang consists of 12 courses served twice daily at roughly 7 in the morning and at roughly 2 in the afternoon. Every ingredient that enters the Sori is checked. Every dish that leaves it is checked. The checking process is called gimi, which translates roughly as food tasting for poison verification. It is not a single check. It is a layered system that begins with the ingredients on delivery and ends just before the tray is placed in front of the king. You know this system because one of your duties as a court physician is to support the gimi process when unusual ingredients or new formulations are introduced to the royal kitchen. You do not taste the food yourself. That is the role of specific designated tasters. But you assess the tasters afterward, in the brief window when they wait between the tasting and the serving, and you are present if anything goes wrong. Nothing has gone wrong since you began this rotation. But you know, and everyone in the system knows, that nothing going wrong is not the same as nothing being possible. The history of this dynasty includes instances of illness traced to the royal table. The history of palaces, any palace, includes poison, suspected and confirmed. The checking system exists because the threat is real. The first check happens in the ingredient delivery. Each morning, before the Sori opens for preparation, the day's ingredients are delivered from the royal storehouses and inspected by the head cook against a written list. The list itself was approved the previous day by the court lady supervisor. Any deviation from the list, any substitute ingredient, any addition, requires written approval from 2 separate offices. The second check is during preparation. The cooks work in full view of supervisory staff at all times. The third check is the tasting. The tasting is performed by designated food tasters, court officials called surasangung in common usage, though the official term is more technical. These are not junior staff. They are experienced personnel who have been trained to observe their own physical responses and to report any change, any sensation, any discomfort, however minor, immediately and without hesitation. They eat a portion of each dish. They wait. The waiting period is standardized at roughly 20 minutes. You know something about that 20-minute window. You know that aconite, properly prepared, can take longer than 20 minutes to produce observable symptoms in a healthy adult. You know this because the medical texts document aconite toxicity in detail, and you work with aconite. And when you prepare it for therapeutic use, the first thing you do is calculate the dose at which it becomes dangerous, because therapeutic aconite and toxic aconite are the same substance at different quantities. You have never said this to anyone in the context of the Gimi system. It is a thought you carry, the way you carry other thoughts about the distance between what is documented and what is possible. The Gimi system is the best system available. No system is complete. The king trusts it. The palace trusts it. You trust it because distrusting it would be a form of paralysis. You walk past the kitchen and continue toward the queen's household compound. The attendant with headaches is a young woman, perhaps 17 or 18. She is waiting in a small anteroom, seated on a cushion, her hands folded in her lap. When you come in, she stands and bows. You ask her to be seated. You ask her to describe the headaches. She says they begin at the back of the head, at the base of the skull, and move forward. They are worse in the mornings. They started about 2 weeks ago. You ask, are they worse on one side or even across both sides? She says, more on the right side. You ask, any changes in your vision? She says, sometimes the light bothers me more than usual. You ask, how is your sleep? She says, I do not sleep well. I wake early and cannot return to sleep. You ask, how long have you been in the palace? She says, 8 months. You take her pulse. It is wiry and slightly rapid, qualities that the classical texts associate with liver key stagnation, a pattern caused in part by emotional constraint. You look at her tongue. The edges are slightly red. You think, this young woman has been removed from her home, placed in an institution with strict rules and no private life, and is experiencing the physical expression of that transition in the form of chronic headaches. You say, I am going to place 3 needles, 1 at the base of your skull, 1 between your eyebrows, 1 on the back of your hand at the joining valley point. This will take about 20 minutes. She says, will it hurt? You say, the needle at the valley point will feel sharp for a moment. The others you may not feel at all. She nods. You remove the silver needles from the bamboo tube in your case. You place them carefully, with the precision that comes from having done this procedure enough times that your hands know the angles without consultation. The needle at the feng qi point, the wind pool at the base of the skull, requires the most care. You insert it at the correct angle, shallow and directed, and watch her face. She exhales slowly. You say, breathe normally. She does. You set the timer in your head, 20 minutes by the clock on the wall, and you sit across from her and observe. The needle points are holding well. Her breathing has slowed. The slight tension around her eyes has softened a little. You think about what you will write in the case note. Liver key stagnation pattern. Recommend needle treatment twice weekly for 4 weeks. Recommend modified formula including buplorum and peony root. Address sleep with additional swan zhao ren, sour jujube seed. You also think I cannot write the real cause in the case note. The real cause is that she is 18 years old, and the palace does not give her enough space to be 18 years old. You write what is treatable. After 20 minutes, you remove the needles. She says, "My head feels slightly lighter." You say, "That is the treatment working. It will not resolve after one session. You will need several weeks of treatment." She says, "How many weeks?" You say 4 to 6, possibly more. She accepts this with the particular patience of someone who has already learned that the palace operates on timelines that individuals do not control. You give her the written prescription to take to the preparation room. You go back out into the corridor. The afternoon is moving toward the hour of the horse. The second consort's compound is in the south section of the inner palace, accessible through a gate that requires a special day pass, which Physician Im's office arranged this morning. You show the pass at the gate and are admitted. The second consort's quarters are larger than those of the consort you visited this morning. The compound has 2 inner courtyards, and the buildings have more elaborate painted trim. There is a difference, visible in the architecture itself, in the standing of the 2 women within the palace hierarchy. A court lady meets you at the inner door. She leads you through the first room, which is a formal receiving room with a low lacquered table and cushions, into a second room, which is a smaller, warmer space with personal objects visible. A folded piece of embroidery on a stand, a small celadon vase, a book. The second consort is seated. She is a composed woman, with a carefully arranged face and hands that are still in her lap. She looks at you for a moment before she speaks. She says, "You are the one they call from the Niue one." You bow. You say yes. She says, "Sit." You sit. She says, "What I tell you does not leave this room." You say, "I am bound by the Bureau's confidentiality protocol. Nothing you tell me will be disclosed without your consent, except in cases where your life is at risk." She considers this. She says, "I have not slept deeply for 3 months. My heart sometimes races without reason in the night, and I wake and I cannot slow it. I have lost weight. I know I have lost weight because my robes need adjustment." You take her pulse. The pulse is rapid and thin. There is a quality at the kun position, the first position, that is slightly scattered, which the texts associate with the heart. You ask, "Do you have sensations of heat, particularly in the afternoons or evenings?" She says yes. You ask, "Do you dream?" She says, "When I sleep, the dreams are vivid. Sometimes they wake me." You ask, "Any pain?" She says, "No pain, only tiredness." You look at her tongue. The body is slightly red, the coating thin and dry in the center. You think, heart and kidney yin deficiency with some liver involvement, a pattern common in women under chronic stress, women whose internal resources are being consumed faster than they are replenished. You do not say this directly. You say, The pattern I am seeing is one where the body's reserves are being depleted. It is not dangerous, but it will worsen if it is not addressed. The treatment involves both a formula and some adjustments to your daily habits. She says, "My daily habits are not mine to adjust." You say, "I understand. I will work within what is possible." She says, "You understand more than you say." You meet her eyes. You say, "I am a physician. I observe." She says, "And you keep what you observe." You say, "Yes." She is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "There is something else." She tells you something that you will not write in any logbook. It is not a medical complaint. It is a piece of information about the palace, about the relationships between people in this compound and people in another compound, about something she has seen and heard that she does not know what to do with. She tells you because she trusts you and because you are the only person who comes to her who is not connected to any of the political lines she is navigating. You listen. You do not write it down. You say, "I hear you." You say, "I will come back Thursday to begin the needle treatment. I will send the formula today." You bow and leave. In the corridor outside the compound, walking back toward the Naui one in the cold afternoon air, you think about what she told you. You think about what it means to be a physician in a palace. In the city, outside these walls, a physician treats illness. The illness has causes. The causes are physical or environmental. You address them with what you have. Inside this palace, illness is never only physical. The women you treat are living inside a system that produces certain kinds of illness as reliably as cold weather produces certain kinds of cough. The system is the cause, and you cannot treat the system. You can treat what the system produces in individual bodies, one body at a time, one formula at a time. You think about this as you walk. The sun is lower now. The cold has a different quality in the afternoon, sharper and more direct, and your breath is visible again. You pass through the gate into the outer compound. You pass a group of court officials moving in the opposite direction, toward the inner palace. Their robes the colors of their ranks, blue and green and the deep red of senior officials. None of them look at you. You are part of the landscape to them, a figure in white, moving in a direction that does not intersect with their concerns. You are also the person who treated 3 of those men in the last 2 months for gout, for a chest cough, for a digestive problem that you suspected was aggravated by excessive alcohol consumption, which you noted in the case file without specifying the probable cause. You return to the Naiuan. Physician Im is waiting. He says, "The king's afternoon surasang is at the hour of the sheep, 2.5 hours. I need you there for the Gimi observation." You say, "I will be ready." He says, "There is a new ingredient in today's surasang, fresh ginger from a new supplier. The head cook flagged it for additional review." You say, "I will assess it before the tasting." He says, "Good." You go back to the preparation room. You have 40 minutes before you need to leave for the suragan. You use 20 of those minutes to prepare the second consort's formula. The formula for heart and kidney yin deficiency draws from the classical heart tonifying compound documented in the royal prescriptions, a formula built around Raumania root and asparagus tuber. You use the core ingredients, Raumania root, asparagus tuber, Ophiopagon tuber, schisandra berry, and add a small modification for the liver involvement, white peony root in a moderate quantity. The formula requires slow decoction. You instruct one of the junior staff to watch the heat and adjust the flame at the quarter marks. You will check it when you return from the Sorogan. You spend the remaining 20 minutes reviewing the medical texts for ginger toxicity profiles. The text you consult is the Haeingyak Jipsongbang, the compilation of native Korean prescriptions, assembled by Royal Commission over a century ago, and still the most practically grounded pharmacology reference in the Bureau. It is organized by condition and by substance, and the pharmacology section lists the properties, meridian affinities, and dosage ranges of every substance in common medical use in this kingdom. You turn to the pharmacology volume. Fresh ginger, warming nature, pungent taste, enters the lung, stomach, and spleen meridians. Primary uses: dispersing cold, stopping vomiting, resolving toxicity of certain other herbs. Contraindications: patients with heat patterns, active bleeding, or yin deficiency. You consider the last point. If the consort you treated this morning, who is bleeding and has a heat pattern, were to eat significant quantities of fresh ginger prepared for the royal table, her condition would likely worsen. Court ladies do not eat from the surasang. The surasang is only for the king. You note this for context and return the text to the shelf. You pick up your case. You walk to the Sorogan. The royal kitchen is in a long, low building near the outer edge of the inner palace compound. When you are still 20 paces away, you can smell it. Wood smoke from the cooking fires, the layered scent of broths and grains, something sharp and clean that resolves into the smell of fresh ginger as you get closer. The head cook meets you at the door. She is a woman of about 40, with the authoritative bearing of someone who has managed a complex operation for a long time. Her name is Cook Bok. She has been in the Suragan for 18 years, and she knows more about the king's dietary preferences than almost anyone in the palace. She shows you the ginger. It is a pale, fresh rhizome, recently cleaned, sitting in a clay bowl. You pick it up. You smell it. The scent is sharp and slightly sweet, which is correct for fresh ginger. You press the flesh lightly with your thumb. It is firm and slightly fibrous, which is also correct. You ask, where did this come from? Cook Bok says, a new supplier from the southern province. The previous supplier could no longer meet the quantity requirement. You ask, has this supplier been certified by the purchasing office? She says, 3 days ago. The paperwork cleared yesterday. You say, the ginger appears sound. I have no medical objection to its use. The standard tasting protocol applies. She nods. She says, it will be in the jun, the pan-fried preparation, and in the soup base. You note this. You position yourself in the observation area, a designated space along the south wall of the Suragan, slightly removed from the main cooking area, where you can observe the tasting without being in the way. The kitchen at this hour is organized chaos of the most precise kind. 12 dishes are being prepared simultaneously. Each station has its own cook, and above each station is a clay tablet listing the dish, the ingredients, and the preparation method. The sound is constant. Knives on wood, liquid against clay pots, the steady breathing sound of fire through the vents beneath the cooking platforms. The head court lady supervisor arrives. She is the Sangun, the senior court lady, who oversees the sorasang process. She walks through the kitchen with the deliberate attention of an inspector, looking at each station, noting the state of preparation. She does not speak. Her presence is the inspection. She reaches your position and stops. She says, "Physician." You bow. She says, "Anything to note?" You say, "The new ginger has been reviewed. No medical objection. Standard protocol applies." She nods. She continues her inspection. 20 minutes before the surasang is to be served, the tasting begins. The food taster today is a man of about 35. He has been a food taster for 8 years. He carries himself with a practiced stillness, an absence of visible nervousness that is either genuine equanimity or a very effective performance of it. You have observed him a dozen times. You have always been uncertain which it is. He stands before the preparation table. The Sangun presents each dish in turn. He eats a portion of each. He eats the John with the new ginger. He chews deliberately. He swallows. He moves to the next dish. You watch his face. You watch the color of his skin, which should remain even. You watch his hands, which should remain steady. You watch for any change in his breathing. He works through all 12 dishes. He stands. The Sangun says, "Speak." He says, "Nothing to report. All dishes are within normal range." She nods. She turns to you. You say, "The taster presents no signs of adverse reaction. Respiration is normal. Color is normal. No visible distress. The surasang may proceed." The Sangun bows slightly, more a nod of acknowledgement than a bow. She gives the instruction. The dishes are arranged on the surasang tray, the royal table, in the specific geometric pattern prescribed by court protocol. Each dish has its designated position. The colors of the dishes alternate according to the 5-phase theory that organizes royal nutrition. One dish for each of the 5 flavors, one color for each of the 5 elements. You watch the tray leave the kitchen. It will travel across the inner compound under escort, through 2 gates, into the king's receiving room, where it will be presented to the king by a team of court ladies who will lift the covers in the correct sequence and withdraw to a respectful distance. The king will eat alone, or nearly alone. His meals are a formal act. You have never seen him eat. You have only seen what his eating produces in his body, recorded in your case notes and in Physician Im's entries in the master log. The king has a tendency toward heat, rising to the upper body after meals, which manifests as slight facial flushing and occasional headaches. You have modified the post-meal formula 3 times in the past year to address this. The modification that is currently working involves adding a small amount of chrysanthemum flour, which descends heat in the upper body. The king knows none of this. He knows there is a formula. He takes it because the physicians prescribe it. He does not know the name of the physician who formulated it. You walk back to the Naiwan. Your second consort's formula is ready when you return. You check the color and consistency correct, and the temperature correct, and seal it for the midday delivery, which is running slightly late today. You give the carrying case to the delivery staff. You sit down at your station. You look at the case log. You have 4 entries left from this morning's list. 2 were completed. 2 remain. The second consort has been seen. The 4th entry, the blank name, was the second consort. You cross both off. You add today's case notes. The light through the small window of the preparation room is changing. The afternoon is moving toward its midpoint. In an hour, the palace will begin to shift toward the quieter rhythms of late afternoon. The king's study period, the scholars in the outer court, the gradual slowing that precedes the evening. You begin reviewing tomorrow's schedule. It is a long list. There is one entry that makes you pause. It says, Inner Palace Assessment. Consult requested by Senior Physician. Patient to be confirmed. Below it, in different ink, added later, is a single character. Emergency Preparation. Dawn. You look at this for a moment. Emergency preparation at dawn means something you will not know until dawn. You add it to your internal list of uncertainties, the list you carry alongside the official one. The preparation room is quieter now. 2 of the other physicians have left for afternoon house calls. The grinding stones are still. The braziers are burning low. Outside, the wind has come up. You can hear it against the eaves of the Neuan, the faint musical knock of the wooden wind chimes that someone hung outside the far window, a small private act of decoration in an institution that discourages individual expression. You do not know who hung them. You have decided not to find out. Some small things in this palace are better left to their own meanings. You pick up a reference text and begin to read. The light is good for another hour. You use it. The emergency preparation note is still on your desk when you arrive the next morning. It was placed there by the night duty physician, a woman named Physician Yoon, who covers the hours between the second watch and the 4th, the deep middle of the night when the palace breathes slowly and most of its inhabitants are asleep. Physician Yoon leaves notes on your desk when something requires follow-up. The notes are brief and precise, written in a small, even hand. This one says, Crown Prince. Cough active through 2nd and 3rd watch. Fever onset, 3rd watch. Temperature assessed by touch, significant. Senior physician notified. Formula adjusted per standing order. Patient currently sleeping. Reassess at dawn. You read it twice. You set it down. You go immediately to the preparation room. The modified formula for fever with cough in a patient with an existing heat presentation is not the same formula you prepared yesterday. The fritillaria compound you made for a dry cough in a 14-year-old boy without fever is the wrong formula for that same boy with a fever. Fever changes the picture. Fever at the 3rd watch, appearing after a full day of dry cough and nighttime disruption, means something has progressed in a direction you had hoped to prevent. You pull the reference text. You work through the presentation systematically, the way your training taught you to work, not from habit but from principle, because habit produces the formula you expect to give, and expectation is a form of error when the patient's condition has changed overnight. Crown Prince, 14 years old. Previously, dry cough, heat signs, yin deficiency pulse. Now, same cough, fever added, onset third watch, sleep disrupted through night. The formula shifts. You reduce the fritillaria. You add mulberry leaf, which you had already planned, and increase its quantity for the fever. You add chrysanthemum flower, the same ingredient you use in the king's post-meal formula, because it descends heat and benefits the eyes. And you noted 2 days ago that the prince was squinting in the light, a detail you wrote down without yet acting on. You add a small measure of forsythia fruit, cooling, anti-inflammatory in classical theory, and the texts associate it with fever in younger patients. You begin the preparation. The grinding is methodical. You do not rush it. At the second grinding stone, physician Yoon is finishing her own notes before leaving for her rest period. She looks at what you are preparing. She says, "I added more cooling herbs last night when the fever came up. Gardenia fruit, a small amount." You say, "What was the response?" She says, "The fever did not drop, but it did not climb further. He was sleeping when I left him." You say, "I will assess the pulse directly." She nods. She picks up her case and leaves. You finish the preparation and carry the formula to the carrying case. You seal it. You write the band. Your name, Physician Yoon's name, Physician Im's name, the authorization chain for this modification to the standing formula. 3 names for 1 cup of medicine, going to 1 boy behind 3 gates. This is the weight of the work. You go to the donggong. Steward Choi is at the gate before you reach it. He has been watching for you. His face, normally arranged in the careful neutrality of a senior household manager, is showing something he cannot quite contain, a tension around the eyes and jaw that means the night was harder than the note indicated. He says he had chills. After the 3rd watch, he would not eat the late evening meal. You say, "Was the cough productive at any point? Was there any sputum?" He says, "Some, slightly yellow." This is significant. Yellow sputum means heat in the lung has progressed to the point of producing what the classical texts call phlegm heat, a more substantive pathological development than the simple dry cough you were treating yesterday. The formula you just prepared is partially correct. It is not yet complete. You think for 3 seconds. You say, "I need to adjust the formula before it is administered. Give me 10 minutes." He steps back. You open your case on the low table just inside the gate. You have the materials for a small modification. You carry powdered skullcap root as a standard item in your traveling case, precisely because it is one of the most reliable cooling agents for lung heat with yellow phlegm in the classical system. You add a measured portion to the decoction cup through the cloth cover. Stir it with the bamboo utensil, reseal. You replace the paper band with a new one that records the modification, the time, and the reason. You give the case to Steward Choi. He takes it. He says, "The senior physician has been notified." You say yes. He will be here within the hour for a full assessment. This is the dawn formula. It addresses what changed overnight. He nods. He goes in. You wait in the receiving room. Through the screen that separates the receiving room from the inner corridor, you can hear, faintly, movement. A door, quiet voices, the sound of something being poured. You sit. You have been in this receiving room many times. It is a formal room with a low lacquered table, a painted folding screen along the east wall showing cranes in a pine forest, and a single oil lamp that burns from before dawn to after dusk. The screen is a standard decorative item for rooms of this type, cranes symbolizing longevity and scholarly virtue, pine trees symbolizing endurance. The Crown Prince studies in a room beyond this one, at a desk that faces east, because the morning light comes from the east, and the Confucian tradition associates eastward orientation with the beginning of things, with learning, with the season of spring. He studies 6 to 8 hours a day. He has studied 6 to 8 hours a day for 6 years. He is 14 years old, and his schedule was written before he was born, in the sense that the schedule of a crown prince in this dynasty is not individual to any particular prince. It is the schedule of the institution of crown prince, a role that existed before he did and will exist after him in the next generation. He was named crown prince at age 4. He began formal study at age 8, with 3 royal tutors assigned specifically to his education, one specialist in the classical Chinese texts, one in history and governance, one in ritual protocol. Each tutor writes a daily report on the prince's progress. Each report is reviewed by the Ministry of Rites. The reports are archived. The prince is evaluated in quarterly assessments by a panel that includes the tutors, the bureau director of the Ministry of Rites, and a senior court official appointed by the king. The results of these assessments are recorded. He is 14 years old, and his academic performance is a matter of official record. You think about the headaches and the disrupted sleep and the cough that appeared in a boy who spends 6 to 8 hours a day bent over texts in an undercooled room, and then eats dinner in formal silence, and then is expected to sleep deeply and wake refreshed. You think about this carefully. You do not write any of it in the case note. Steward Choi returns. He says he drank about half. You say half is acceptable. Did he keep it down? He says yes. You say, the senior physician will assess the full condition when he arrives. If the fever worsens before then, send to the Neowon immediately. Do not wait for the scheduled visit. He says, I understand. You bow. You leave the donggong. Physician Im is in the corridor between the outer gate and the medical bureau when you return. He is already moving toward the donggong, the master log under his arm. He stops when he sees you. You tell him everything. Physician Yoon's night note, the yellow sputum, the formula modification, the half-dose consumed. He listens without interrupting. When you finish, he says, yellow sputum at onset means this moved quickly. You say yes. I adjusted for phlegm heat. Skullcap root added this morning. He says correct. I will assess the pulse directly. Meet me at the donggong in 1 hour with a second formula, same base, add fritillaria, and reduce the ginger. No warming agents until the fever resolves. You say, understood. He continues toward the donggong. You turn back toward the Neiwan. You have 1 hour. You use it to prepare the second formula and to review the king's morning schedule, because the king's morning pulse assessment is still your responsibility regardless of what is happening with the prince, and the schedule does not bend for concurrent cases unless a life is immediately at risk. The king's morning assessment is in 40 minutes. You will make it. The king's name is not something you use, even in your thoughts. You think of him by his function. He is the king, the throne, the patient in the largest chamber behind the most gates. He is 62 years old, which is an advanced age for this time and this climate, and he is in fair health for his age, which is itself a clinical achievement that the Nyawan takes quiet pride in. The king's primary ongoing conditions: recurring heat rising to the upper body, as previously noted; occasional joint pain in the right knee, which he has had for at least 4 years based on the medical logs you have reviewed; seasonal respiratory sensitivity, which worsens in late winter and early spring. These are the conditions you manage. There are others, recorded in the restricted archive, that are managed exclusively by Physician Im and the bureau director. Those you do not know in detail. You know they exist. You know the restricted archive exists. You have never been in the room where it is kept. You prepare the king's morning formula, a maintenance decoction of ginseng root, jujube fruit, and licorice root, the base formula for general qi support, with a small addition of chrysanthemum flower for the heat tendency. This formula has been stable for 6 months. You prepare it from memory. The morning assessment of the king follows a protocol that is documented in the Nyawan regulations and has been practiced, with minor modifications for each monarch's individual conditions, since the early decades of the dynasty. The assessment happens in 2 phases. The first phase is the visual assessment, conducted by Physician Im, who enters the king's receiving room and observes. He observes the color of the king's face, the clarity of his eyes, the quality of his breathing, his posture, his apparent energy level. He may ask questions through the standard intermediary protocol. He writes his observations. The second phase is the pulse assessment. This is where you enter. The king's pulse is assessed through a silk cloth laid over his wrist. The cloth is a standard piece of light silk, about the size of your hand, folded twice to create 4 layers. You place your 3 fingers on the cloth and feel for the pulse through it. This arrangement exists because the prohibition against unmediated physical contact between a physician and the king is not absolute for the king as it is for noble women. Male physicians can and do touch the king directly when clinically necessary, but the silk cloth is the standard practice for routine assessment, a form of protocol that separates the ritual from the emergency. You assess the king's pulse through silk and report your findings to Physician Im in writing, on a small slip of paper that you hand to him after the assessment. He incorporates your findings into his clinical note. You have never spoken directly to the king. You have been 2 feet from him, your fingers separated from his wrist by 4 layers of silk, and you have not spoken. This is the arrangement. The king's receiving room is in the main inner palace building, the Daejeon, the Great Hall compound, which is a different wing from the Donggung where the prince is. The receiving room is adjacent to the main throne room, but smaller, more personal in its furniture and scale, with a sleeping area behind a wooden screen and a formal seating area where the morning assessment occurs. You stand to the left of Physician Im during the visual assessment. You observe what he observes, and you also observe what he may not be looking for, because two pairs of eyes calibrated to the same patient see different things over time, and you have been calibrating your observations on this particular patient for years. The king is seated on a low cushion. He is wearing his informal morning robe, a lighter garment than the court robe he wears for official functions. His top knot is dressed but not fully formal. His face is composed with the particular composure of someone who has been practicing composure for 6 decades, a composure that does not entirely erase what is underneath it. What you observe this morning, slightly less color than last week. Not dramatic, but the face is slightly less vivid. The eyes are clear. Breathing is even. He shifted his right knee twice in the 90 seconds of your observation, which is consistent with the joint pain that is on record. Physician Im conducts the standard verbal assessment through the Chamberlain. How did you sleep? Any pain? Any changes since yesterday? The king answers through the same intermediary. The sleep was adequate. No significant pain. No notable changes. Physician Im nods and turns to you. You approach. You kneel at the correct distance, close enough to reach the outstretched wrist comfortably, far enough to maintain the required spatial protocol. The king extends his wrist without looking at you. A court lady places the silk cloth across his wrist. You set your fingers. Index finger at the kun position, nearest the wrist crease. Middle finger at the guan position, at the prominence of the styloid process. Ring finger at the chi position, distal. The pulse through silk is not the same as the pulse against skin. There is a layer of translation, a loss of fine detail, and what you are feeling is a filtered version of the full picture. Over time, over hundreds of assessments, you have calibrated your sense of what the filtered version means, what each quality through silk corresponds to at the skin surface. The king's pulse this morning, moderate rate, not slow, not rapid. The guan position is slightly full, which suggests the stomach and liver meridians are carrying more energy than optimal. The kun position is adequate. The chi position is the one you focus on longest, because the chi reflects the deeper reserves, the foundational energy that the classical texts call kidney essence. The chi pulse is present and adequate. This is good. In an older patient, the chi pulse is the one you watch most carefully, because when it begins to thin or weaken, the prognosis for other conditions worsens. A patient with a full chi pulse can recover from many things. A patient with a thin chi pulse cannot. The king's chi pulse is holding. You withdraw your fingers. You write your assessment on the paper slip. Pulse moderate, guan slightly full, chi adequate, no significant change from last assessment. Recommend continuing current formula. Monitor guan position. You hand it to Physician Im. He reads it. He makes a note in the log. You withdraw from the room. You walk back toward the Naiwan through the inner palace, passing the Donggung on your way, and you think about two pulses, the king's, which is holding, and the prince's, which was rapid and thin last night, and which you will not assess directly until Physician Im has completed his assessment and requests a secondary evaluation. The work of this morning has 3 threads running at once. The prince's fever is the most urgent. The king's maintenance is the most important in political terms. The second consort's case, the one you cannot write down fully, is the one you carry with the most weight. You carry all three. You return to the Naiwan and pick up the second formula for the prince. Physician Im is back from the Donggang when you arrive. He is at his desk with the log open. He says the fever is at a moderate level, not dangerous yet. The pulse is rapid and floating. The phlegm is progressing. He looks at the second formula. He says, "Good. Send it with the midday distribution. I want an assessment this evening at the 7th hour." You say, "I will go myself." He looks at you. He says, "You can send Physician Yun." You say, "I want to assess the pulse directly this evening." He considers this. He says, "The protocol for female physicians and the crown prince." You say, "I will conduct the assessment through the screen. Steward Choi will confirm the pulse quality verbally based on my written questions." He looks at you for a moment. He says, "Fine. Write the assessment protocol in advance so there is no ambiguity on the process." You say, "I will have it ready before the 7th hour." He nods. You go back to your station. The midday distribution is being prepared. The carrying cases for 9 patients are lined up along the east wall of the preparation room, each labeled, each sealed. You add the prince's case to the line, then move to the back of the room where there is a low shelf of reference texts you rarely need to access because you have read most of them enough times to carry the relevant sections in your head. You sit on the floor beside the shelf, which is not the most dignified posture, but the floor beside the reference shelf is the quietest corner of the preparation room, and you need for 10 minutes to think without interruption. You think about the second consort. What she told you yesterday afternoon, the thing you did not write down, is a piece of information about a situation between 2 of the palace women that involves the distribution of access to the king. It is not a dramatic piece of information. There is no accusation in it. There is only observation, a pattern she has noticed, and the discomfort of noticing it without being able to name it to anyone safely. She named it to you. You are the safest possible repository for this information because you have the most to lose from repeating it. A court physician who breaches the confidentiality of a patient's consultation is a court physician who loses her position, and her position is the only thing that separates her from the status she was born into, which is the lowest category available in this social system. You will not repeat what she told you, but you will carry it. You learned this in the 3rd year of training when you were 15 and had just completed your first solo consultation with a female patient in the outer city who told you something that was not a medical complaint. You did not know what to do with it. You sat with her until she was finished speaking, and then you treated what was treatable, and you carried the rest home. You understood afterward that carrying it was the thing. That being the person who could hold something without needing to fix it or repeat it was a form of medicine that had no name in any text you had read. You have thought about this many times since. You thought about it in the second consort's room yesterday. You think about it now. The preparation room is quieter now, the midday rush of formulas nearly complete. Two of the other physicians are eating from the kitchen distribution that arrived at the hour of the horse. Small lacquered boxes of rice and preserved vegetables and soup. The smell of the food is familiar and homely. A smell that always reminds you of the training school where you first learned to eat in this way, quickly and at a desk between tasks. You take your own box. You eat. Outside, the afternoon has settled into its slower rhythm. The light through the high window is direct and pale, winter light with little warmth in it. In the courtyard beyond the wall, you can hear sparrows, the only creatures in this palace who follow no protocol. You eat your rice. You think about the prince's fever. You think about the modification you made to the formula this morning and whether the skullcap dosage was correct and whether the removal of warming agents was correct given that the fever was accompanied by chills, which creates a diagnostic complexity. Chills suggest cold, fever suggests heat, and the presence of both requires a careful balance in the formula. The classical texts call this a Shaoyang pattern, a half-interior, half-exterior condition where the pathogen is caught between the surface of the body and the interior, producing alternating cold and heat. The formula for this pattern is the small bupleurum compound, a classical prescription that addresses both the surface and the interior simultaneously. You think, I should have thought of this morning. You also think, the formula I made this morning was correct for what the information available to me indicated. The information available to me this morning was incomplete because the diagnosis was incomplete. This is medicine. The diagnosis is always incomplete at any given moment. You treat what you know. You update when you learn more. You finish eating. You pull the reference text for the minor bupleurum decoction formula and review the dosages. You write out the modification for the evening formula. Bupleurum root, the primary herb, which moves qi between the interior and the exterior. Scutellaria root, which clears heat. Panelia tuber, which transforms phlegm. Fresh ginger, small amount only, because the warming agent is necessary in this pattern for the stomach, even when you would otherwise avoid it in a heat presentation. You add the fritillaria for the cough. You add the skullcap. The formula is longer than the morning formula. This is appropriate. The condition has become more complex. You write the full preparation instructions and leave them at Physician Im's station for review before the evening preparation begins. Then you pick up your case and go to your afternoon patients. The Queen's household compound is in the northern section of the inner palace, the largest and most elaborately maintained compound in the inner palace after the king's own. The Queen is the formal head of the inner court, the responsible authority for all the women within the palace walls, and the Queen's compound reflects this status in its scale and the quality of its maintenance. The Queen herself is a patient of Physician Im's, not yours. Senior female court patients of the highest rank are attended by the senior male physician in matters of general health, and are attended by female physicians only for specifically female medical matters. You have conducted 2 examinations of the Queen in your time at the palace, both related to gynecological concerns. Both were conducted with Physician Im present in the outer room and the Queen's senior court lady in the inner room as a witness. Today you are not seeing the Queen. You are seeing one of the senior court ladies of her household, a woman you have been treating for a digestive condition for 3 months. She is in her 40s, with a chronic pattern that the texts describe as liver invading the spleen, a functional imbalance where tension and emotional restraint over time disrupts digestion. She is one of the most controlled people you have ever met. She never varies her expression. Her hands are always still. She answers your questions in complete sentences of measured length. She eats what she is served. She sleeps when she is scheduled to sleep. Her digestion is in constant rebellion. You treat the rebellion. You do not comment on its cause. She is waiting for you in the small medical anteroom attached to the Queen's outer household building. It is a plain room compared to the decorated spaces of the main compound, with a single window and a low table and 2 cushions designed for exactly this purpose, the regular medical consultations that palace women require and that require some degree of privacy. She bows when you enter. You bow in return. You sit. You take her pulse. It is wiry and slightly forceful, which has been consistent across all your assessments. You look at her tongue. The edges are slightly purple, a color associated with qi stagnation. You say, the tongue shows improvement from last month. The purple is less pronounced. She says, the formula is helping. You say, are the episodes of pain less frequent? She says yes, perhaps half as often as before. When they occur, they are shorter. You say, I will continue the formula. I want to add 1 herb for the next month. Turmeric root, a small amount. It moves blood in the liver meridian. She says, is there anything I should avoid eating? You say cold foods, especially cold liquids. The digestion benefits from warmth. Avoid raw vegetables in large quantities. She nods. She says, after a pause, the crown prince is ill. You look at her. She says, the household knows. These walls are not as thick as they appear. You say his physicians are attending him. She says, will he recover? You say, the condition is being treated appropriately. She says, he is 14. You say yes. She is quiet for a moment. Then she says, his mother would be worried if she knew. You say, the royal family is informed of significant medical matters through the appropriate channels. She says yes, of course. You write the updated formula prescription. You hand it to her. You bow and leave. In the corridor outside, you think about what she said. The crown prince's mother is not the queen. The queen is the king's primary consort and the formal head of the inner court, but she is not the mother of the current crown prince. The crown prince was born to a different consort, a woman who died 6 years ago when the prince was 8 years old. He has been 14 years old and motherless for 6 years, studying 8 hours a day, his pulse rapid and thin, coughing in the night. You think about this for the length of 1 corridor. Then you put it where you put the things that are true but have no treatment. You continue to your next patient. The late afternoon brings you back through the inner palace one more time to a small compound you have not visited before. The compound belongs to the king's eldest daughter, the princess, who is 20 years old and recently returned from her formal residence assignment in the outer city. The referral is new, written this morning by physician Im. The presenting complaint is fatigue and irregular menstruation, which are standard concerns for women of this age and social position, and the standard treatment protocol begins with a pulse assessment and a review of diet and sleep. The princess is not in her receiving room when you arrive. Her attendant explains, "She is finishing her calligraphy practice. She will be here shortly." You wait. You look at the room. It is a personal room in a way that the other rooms you visit are not. There are objects chosen for their meaning rather than their protocol. A book left open on a low stand, a brush with a distinctive carved handle, a small clay figure of a rabbit on the windowsill. The princess comes in quickly, without the measured pace of an official entrance. She is a tall woman, taller than you, with an open face and ink on her right hand that she has not fully wiped away. She sits. She looks at you with a directness that most palace women do not use with medical staff. She says, "How long does this take?" You say the initial assessment is about 20 minutes. She says, "I have a lesson in 40. You say, "We have time." She extends her wrist without waiting to be asked. You take her pulse. It is thin and slightly slow, not alarmingly slow, but slow enough to note. The quality at the chi position suggests some depletion in the lower energetic centers, which is consistent with the reported fatigue and irregular menstruation. You ask your questions. She answers them precisely and without elaboration. Fatigue appears in the afternoons, worse after study periods, menstrual cycle irregular for 4 months, 3 weeks apart 1 month, 5 weeks apart the next. No pain, sleep adequate, appetite good. You say, "I will prepare a formula to tonify the blood and support the lower abdomen. The irregularity should improve over 2 to 3 months." She says, 2 to 3 months. You say, "These patterns develop slowly and resolve slowly. The formula addresses the root, not just the symptom." She considers this. She says, "My teacher says that calligraphy teaches you to tolerate slow improvement. The character does not appear correctly in the first week or the first month." You say, "That is an accurate parallel." She almost smiles. She says, "Can the formula be taken in the morning? My schedule does not allow for afternoon preparations." You say, "Morning is acceptable. I will note the timing." She nods. You write the prescription. She looks at it when you hand it to her, which is unusual. Most palace women hand the prescription to an attendant without looking at it. She reads it. She says, "I cannot read the herb names in Chinese." You say, "The preparation room staff will read it. You do not need to." She says, "I would like to know what I am taking." You say the primary herb is prepared Rehmannia. It tonifies blood and supports the kidney essence. Secondary herbs support circulation and digestion. A small amount of dongquai for the blood. She nods slowly, absorbing this. She says, "Thank you." She says it the way a person says it when they mean it. Not the formal courtesy version, but the version where something genuine passed between two people, and one of them acknowledged it. You bow. You leave. The walk back to the Neuwan takes you past the Donggong one more time. The sun is low. The light is the color of dry grass, the winter afternoon color that means an hour of daylight remains. Steward Choi is standing at the gate of the Donggong compound. He sees you. He says, "The fever came down slightly this afternoon. He slept for 2 hours." You say, "Good. The evening formula will address the full pattern more completely. Do not delay it past the 7th hour." He says, "I will not." You say, "If the fever rises again tonight, send immediately, before the second watch. Do not wait to see if it resolves on its own." He says, "I understand." You look at the gate of the Donggong for a moment. Behind it, somewhere in the compound, a boy with no mother and 8 hours of study a day and a rapid, thin pulse is sleeping through a fever that will either resolve or progress, and you have done what the medicine available to you allows, and now you wait, the way physicians always wait, in the space between what you have done and what the body decides to do next. You walk back to the Niue one. You prepare the evening formula for the prince. You write the assessment protocol for the 7th hour visit. You set both on your station. Outside, the palace lamps are coming on, one by one, along the corridors and at the gates, small fires that hold the darkness at measured distances. Inside, the preparation room is warm. You sit at your desk. You write in your case log until the light begins to fail. The 7th hour arrives before the preparation room has fully quieted. You pick up the assessment protocol you wrote this afternoon and review it one more time. The protocol is 3 pages, written in a format physician approved. A sequence of questions you will pass through Steward Choi to the prince's chamberlain, who will relay them verbally to the prince, who will answer, and the answers will be relayed back in the same chain, and from those answers you will assess the fever's direction. It is not the same as taking a pulse directly. You know this. You have thought carefully about what the protocol cannot give you, and you have designed the questions to compensate as far as language can compensate for the absence of touch. You ask about the quality of the chills. Are they in the skin or deeper, in the bones and muscles? Skin chills suggest a surface pathogen. Bone chills suggest the pathogen has moved inward. You ask about thirst. Is there a desire for cold water, warm water, or no water? Desire for cold water suggests interior heat. No thirst suggests the fluid metabolism is disrupted. You ask about the character of the cough. Is the sputum easier to expectorate than this morning, or more difficult? Easier suggests the formula is moving the phlegm correctly. More difficult suggests the phlegm is thickening, which would require a formula change. You ask about the location of discomfort. Is there any sensation of fullness or pain in the chest or ribs? Pain or fullness in the ribs is the classical location for a Shaoyang pattern, and its presence would confirm your diagnosis from this afternoon. You have 4 questions. Each one is designed to give you a piece of the picture you cannot get through a screen. You put the protocol in your case and walk to the Donggong. The inner palace at the 7th hour, roughly 4 in the afternoon, is in a state of ordered transition. The administrative functions of the day are winding down. The morning court session ended hours ago. The afternoon study periods for the scholarly staff are concluding. The kitchen is preparing the evening meals. The lamps are lit. The guards are changing at the gates. Steward Choi is at the Donggung gate. You hand him the protocol. He takes it. He goes in. You wait in the receiving room. The wait is longer than usual, 12 minutes. You count them against the water clock on the waiting room wall. When Steward Choi returns, he has the protocol paper in his hand. He has written the prince's answers in the margins in his own neat hand. You read them. The chills, deeper than the skin, in the muscles. This confirms the pathogen has not remained on the surface. The thirst, slight desire for warm water only, no desire for cold. This is a complex answer. In a heat pattern, no desire for cold water is unusual. It suggests the interior heat is present, but the yang qi, the warming force, is also compromised. This is the Shaoyang presentation you suspected. The sputum, easier than this morning. The morning formula moved the phlegm. This is good. The chest and ribs, a sensation of fullness in the left rib area, not pain, fullness. There it is. The fullness in the ribs is the diagnostic marker. The classical text says, fullness in the chest and ribs, alternating cold and heat. This belongs to the Shaoyang. The formula is minor bupleurum modified. You have the evening formula ready. It is already prepared to this pattern. Your reasoning this afternoon was correct. You write on the bottom of the protocol, formula as prepared is appropriate. Administer at 8th hour. Assess again at 3rd watch if fever rises. Send immediately if rib fullness becomes pain. You hand it back to Steward Choi. He reads it. He says, the 3rd watch assessment. Will you come yourself? You say, if needed, yes. He says, he asked about the physician. You are quiet for a moment. You say, what did he ask? Steward Choi says, he asked if it was the same physician who has been treating him. He said the medicines have been different from the ones he usually receives, and he wanted to know if the physician treating him had changed. You think about this. A 14-year-old boy with a fever behind 3 gates, asking through a chain of intermediaries whether the physician treating him has changed. He noticed. The medicines are different because the condition is different, but he noticed that the medicines are different, which means he has been paying attention to the medicines, which means he is not merely consuming what is given to him but observing it. You say, tell him the physician has not changed. The medicines are different because his condition changed overnight, and the treatment is responding to the new presentation. Steward Choi looks at you. He says, I will tell him. You say, tell him also that the fullness he is feeling in his ribs is expected and is addressed in the evening formula. He says, how did you know about the ribs? You say, I asked. He reads the protocol again, sees the question about the ribs, understands. He nods. You bow and leave. Walking back through the inner palace, you think about a 14-year-old boy who asked whether his physician changed. You think about what it means to pay attention to your own treatment, to notice the difference in a formula, to want to understand what is happening to your own body in a system that generally does not explain itself to its patients. You file this thought in the same place you file the other thoughts that are true and useful, but have no direct clinical application. You return to the Naiwan. The preparation room is nearly empty now. The other physicians are either out on evening rounds or in their quarters. You have one more task before the evening: the review of tomorrow's schedule, which you compile from the individual case files and the Bureau's rotating appointment list. You sit at your station. You open the appointment book. There is a new entry added this afternoon in Physician M's hand. It is in the space for the second hour of the morning, before your regular schedule begins. It says Daebijeon, by request, personal attendance required. The Daebijeon is the palace of the Queen Dowager. The Queen Dowager is the king's mother. She is a woman in her late 60s, and she is one of the most consequential people in the kingdom. In Joseon, the Queen Dowager holds a position of formal authority that sits outside and above the normal administrative structure. She cannot issue government edicts, but she can influence every person who does. She has done so in living memory in ways that altered the succession, the composition of the court, and the fates of named ministers and officials whose names appear in the history books marked with her involvement. She has requested your personal attendance at the second hour. Not Physician M, not the bureau director. You. You look at the entry for a long time. You have treated the Queen Dowager twice before, both times for pain in her joints, which is a condition that has worsened over the past 3 years. The treatments were standard acupuncture protocols, conducted through Physician M's framework, as with all senior female patients. The Queen Dowager sat for the treatment with the particular stillness of someone who has made peace with discomfort as a condition of age. She said nothing during either session. She has requested you by name. You write this in your personal log, not the bureau log, in the small notebook that you keep for the observations and questions that are too preliminary or too speculative to enter into the official record. You write, Daebijeon, second hour, by request, unknown presenting complaint. You close the notebook. You go to your quarters. You eat your evening meal from the kitchen distribution, rice and kimchi and a clear soup with dried mushrooms. You eat slowly, which is unusual for you. Most evenings you eat quickly because there is something else waiting. Tonight there is nothing else waiting until tomorrow. The palace outside your window is settling into its night sounds. The guard rotation at the outer gate, the sound of which reaches you as a distant exchange of calls. The creak of the buildings in the cold, the particular knock of old wood contracting as the temperature drops. Somewhere in the direction of the north garden, a night bird. You have spent 7 years listening to the sounds of this palace at night, and you know them all. You wash your face. You lay out tomorrow's uniform. You review the prince's formula timing in your head. 8th hour administration, 3rd watch assessment if needed. If the Shaoyang diagnosis is correct, and you are confident it is, the formula will begin to show effect by the 2nd hour of the night. The fever will settle. The chills will become less frequent. By morning, the pulse should be less rapid. If that does not happen, you will know by the 3rd watch. You lie down. The ondol beneath you is warm. The warmth rises through the floor slowly, steady and even, the product of a fire lit 3 hours ago in the channel beneath the building. In summer, the ondol is not used. In winter, it is the only thing between you and the cold, that settles into the stone of the palace at night, a cold that comes up from the ground and from the river to the north and from the mountain behind the city. You close your eyes. You think briefly about the Queen Dowager's request. You think about the second consort. You think about the princess with ink on her hand. You think about the prince asking whether his physician changed. Then the warmth from the floor takes you and you sleep. The second hour comes before light. The sky through your window is the precise dark of the last hour before dawn, a darkness that is slightly less absolute than midnight dark, with a quality of imminence in it. You know this dark well. You have risen into it more mornings than you can count. You dress. You prepare your case with deliberate additions, a full set of silver needles in the bamboo tube, an extra measure of the joint formula you used in the previous treatments, and a small quantity of huang qi, a stragolous root which tonifies the wei qi, the defensive energy in older patients whose immunity is beginning to thin. You add a folded cloth. You add your case log. You walk to the Debi Zen. The Queen Dowager's palace is in the northwest section of the inner palace, behind the king's main compound, separated from it by a high wall and a gate that is manned by a dedicated guard rotation assigned exclusively to this compound. The Daebijan has its own kitchen, its own staff of court ladies, its own administrative structure. It is a palace within the palace. The guard checks your credentials. He has a notation beside your name on his list. Admitted, second hour. Personal request of the Queen Dowager. He steps aside. You go in. The compound is lit by lanterns on tall poles, their light moving slightly in the night wind. The main hall of the Daebijan is ahead, a larger building than the other inner palace residential structures, with a higher roofline and more elaborate eave brackets, the architecture expressing a status that sits above the ordinary hierarchy of the inner court. A senior court lady meets you at the hall door. She bows. She leads you inside without speaking. The inner room of the Daebijan is warm, much warmer than the corridors outside. Multiple braziers, coal-fed, are placed around the room, and the ondol beneath is also running. The walls are hung with embroidered silk panels, the subject matter longevity symbols, the pine tree and the crane and the deer and the fungus of immortality, Ganoderma, repeated in different arrangements across the panels. The Queen Dowager is sitting upright on a raised platform at the center of the room. She is a small woman, smaller than you expected from her reputation, with a precisely arranged face and white hair dressed into a formal style. She is wearing a heavy silk inner robe and a fur-trimmed outer robe. Her hands, resting in her lap, are the hands of a woman in her late 60s, the joints slightly enlarged, the tendons visible under the skin. She looks at you when you enter. She says nothing for a moment. Then she says, "Sit." You sit on the cushion placed at the correct distance from the platform. She says, "I have been told you are careful." You say, "I try to be." She says, "I have also been told you are discreet." You say, "Yes." She says, "I am going to tell you something, and then I want your clinical assessment. Not what the senior physician would say if I described it through an intermediary. What you observe directly." You say, "I understand." She extends her wrists. You take her pulse without the silk cloth. She has not asked for it, and you do not introduce it. This is the difference between her assessment and the king's assessment. The king's pulse is always mediated by protocol. The queen dowagers in this private room at the second hour of the morning is not. The pulse is thin and slightly irregular. Not dramatically irregular, not the dramatic arrhythmia that indicates immediate danger, but irregular in the way of age, the small misfires of a rhythm that has been beating for nearly 70 years and is beginning to lose some of its precision. The chi position is notably thin. This is what you were afraid to find, and what you suspected based on the joint deterioration and the fact that she called for you specifically before dawn. You keep your fingers in place. You ask, how long has the irregularity been present? She says, 2 months, perhaps slightly more. You ask, do you have any sensation of the irregularity, palpitations, a feeling of the heart skipping? She says, occasionally, at night mostly. You ask, any breathlessness? She says, when I walk quickly across the compound, not otherwise. You ask, the joint pain, is it worse than when I last treated you? She says, yes, the right knee particularly. I can no longer kneel for the full duration of the morning ritual. You withdraw your fingers. You look at her tongue. The body is pale and slightly purple at the edges. The coating is thin. You sit back. She looks at you. She says, what do you see? You think about how to answer this. A physician who tells a patient less than the truth is protecting herself, not the patient. A physician who tells a patient more than the clinical picture supports is frightening a person unnecessarily. The line between them requires calibration. You say the pulse shows some age-related changes in the heart rhythm. This is not uncommon at your age and does not indicate immediate danger. The chi pulse is thinner than in our previous assessments, which tells me the foundational energy reserves are lower than before. She waits. You say, the joint deterioration and the heart irregularity are connected in classical theory. They both reflect a gradual decline in the kidney essence, which is the foundational energy that supports all the organ systems. This process is part of aging and cannot be reversed. It can be supported. She says, supported. You say, yes. The formula I would recommend tonifies the kidney essence and supports the heart. Acupuncture at the kidney and heart meridian points will address the joint pain and may stabilize the irregularity. I cannot eliminate either condition. I can slow its progression and manage its symptoms. She is quiet. She says, how much time do I have? You say, I cannot answer that question accurately. She says, estimate. You say, if the current pattern continues and you receive appropriate treatment, the conditions are manageable for several more years. If there is an acute event, a significant fever, a fall, any major physical stress, the prognosis changes. She nods. She says, I see. She looks at her hands. She says, I have arranged certain things. There are matters I have been managing that will need to be handed to other parties. I wanted to know the timeline before I made those arrangements. You say nothing. She says, you will write none of this in the bureau log. You say, I will write the clinical assessment in the log. The conversation I will not write. She says, good. She says, begin the treatment. You prepare the needles. The points you select are kidney 3, the source point of the kidney meridian at the medial ankle; heart 7, the source point of the heart meridian at the wrist; pericardium 6, the inner gate point, which addresses both the heart and the digestive system in the classical system, and which has a calming effect on the cardiac rhythm that you have observed across many patients; spleen 6, the meeting point of the 3 yin meridians of the leg, which supports the lower foundation. You place the needles with care. The Queen Dowager does not speak during the treatment. She sits with the stillness you observed before, the stillness of someone who has learned to inhabit their own body without complaint. 20 minutes. You monitor the treatment throughout, observing her face and breathing. Both remain even. The quality of her stillness shifts slightly after about 10 minutes, a softening that is the effect of the needle treatment on the nervous system, which the classical texts attribute to the movement of qi and which you observe in almost every patient who responds to acupuncture. Something releases. Not dramatically, a slight softening of the set of her shoulders. She says, at about the 15-minute mark, you are from outside the capital. You say, from the western province, a small county. She says, how old were you when you came here? You say, 12. She says, that is very young. You say, it is the standard age. She says, the standard age, yes. She is quiet again. Then do you miss it? You think about this honestly. You say, I have been here longer than I was there. I do not always know what I would be missing. She considers this. She says that is an honest answer. You say, I try to be honest. She says, yes, that is why I asked for you. You remove the needles at the 20-minute mark. You press each point briefly with the folded cloth. You say, I will prepare a formula and have it sent this morning. I recommend treatment twice weekly. I would like to assess the pulse again in 10 days. She nods. She says 10 days. You bow. You leave the inner room. In the outer corridor, the senior court lady is waiting. She walks you to the compound gate without speaking. At the gate she stops. She says quietly, she has not called a physician privately in 12 years. You say nothing. She says, I want you to know that. You say, I understand. You walk back through the inner palace. The sky is lightening, not sunrise yet, but the darkness is thinning at the eastern edges, the sky moving from black to a deep indigo that will reach gray before the sun appears. The inner palace in this light is something you have seen hundreds of times, and it is still remarkable to itself, still exact, the white walls catching the early light at a different angle than the roof tiles, the paved paths holding the darkness a few minutes longer than the open sky above them. You walk back to the Naiwan. Physician Im is in his office when you arrive. He looks up. He says, the Daebichun. You say yes. He says, how is she? You say, I will write the clinical assessment before the morning rounds. The summary: heart irregularity of an age-related nature, kidney essence depletion at the level I would expect for her age, joint deterioration continuing. I am recommending the tonification formula and twice-weekly needle treatment. He says, nothing acute? You say, not at this time. He says, good. He returns to the log. You sit at your station. You open the case log. You write the Queen Dowager's clinical assessment in the careful, precise language of the official record. Date, patient designation, pulse findings, tongue findings, pattern diagnosis, treatment applied, formula recommendation, follow-up schedule. You write for about 20 minutes. Then you close the log. You pick up your case. You go to the preparation room. The day is beginning again, and the preparation room is filling again, and the grinding stones and the clay braziers and the measuring cups are exactly where they always are, and the smell of the room is the same smell it is every morning: herbs and coal smoke, and the particular mineral sharpness of silver needles cleaned and set in their bamboo tubes. You go to your station. You begin the Crown Prince's morning formula. Yesterday's modification was correct. You know this because Steward Choi sent a note at the second watch. Fever decreased, patient sleeping, no acute change. The note is in your case now, folded into the log. The prince's fever broke in the night, or rather it softened, moved from acute to something more manageable. The Shaoyang pattern is resolving in the direction you expected. The body is cooperating. This is not guaranteed. You have had cases where the body did not cooperate, where the pattern shifted in the night into something worse, where the formula you sent at the 8th hour was wrong for the condition that developed by the first watch. You have had those cases, and you carry them the way you carry all the cases, accurately, without distortion in either direction, because distorting the memory of a case you got wrong is a way of making it more likely to make the same mistake again. You grind the bupleurum root. It is fibrous and slightly bitter smelling. You grind it until the texture is even. You measure it. You set it aside. You work through the rest of the formula in the standard sequence. Outside, the palace bells mark the 3rd hour. Somewhere in the Donggung, a 14-year-old boy is waking from the best sleep he has had in 3 days, his fever lower, his cough less frequent, his ribs less full. He does not know your name. He knows the medicines changed. He knows someone asked about the ribs. That is enough. You add the water to the preparation bowl. You watch the surface of the water until the small bubbles form and rise continuously, steady and even, the right temperature for the herbs that are waiting in the bowl. You add the herbs. You set the bowl on the heat. You begin the next formula. The window above your station shows the sky, and the sky is the color of early morning, the gray that precedes everything, the color the world is before the sun decides what kind of day it will be. You work in that light. You have work enough for the full day ahead. You know this, and it does not trouble you. It is the shape of the life you are living, the only life available to you in this time and this place, and you have learned to find within its boundaries a kind of steadiness, the steadiness of someone who has accepted the ground they are standing on and decided to stand on it as well as they can. The herbs begin to release their smell into the warm air of the preparation room. The other physicians arrive one by one. The grinding stones begin. The day opens like a hand. 3 days pass without a crisis. This is unusual enough that you notice it. In the Naiwan, 3 consecutive quiet days are not celebrated. They are observed, the way a physician observes a patient whose condition is stable but not resolved, with attention rather than relief. Stability is not the same as health. Quiet is not the same as order. You have been in this palace long enough to know that the moments before a difficult case are often indistinguishable from ordinary days. You note the 3 quiet days in your case log. You note them and continue the work. The Crown Prince's fever resolved on the 2nd day, exactly as the Shaoyang pattern predicted it would. The formula held. The body cooperated. Steward Choi sent a note on the morning of the 3rd day. The prince attended his morning study session. He ate a full breakfast. The cough is residual and dry, improving. You read the note and made a small notation in your case log and set it down. The consort in the East Wing is improving also. The bleeding has reduced to a level the formula can manage. She is sleeping better. Her pulse at the last assessment was less thin than the week before. The Queen Dowager has received 2 acupuncture treatments. She has said nothing further about the things she told you in the Daebijan at the 2nd hour. She sits for the treatment with the same stillness as before. And when it is finished, she nods, and you bow and leave, and what passed between you remains in the space where you keep such things. On the 4th morning, you wake before the bell. This is not unusual. What is unusual is the quality of the waking, a sharpness to it, the kind of waking that has no gradual transition from sleep, but arrives fully formed, as if something in you has already decided to be awake before the rest of you caught up. You lie still for a moment. The room is quiet. The andol beneath you is warm. Outside, the wind is low. You rise. You dress. You go to the preparation room. The night duty physician is Physician Yoon again. She is at her station, writing in the night log, and when you come in, she looks up with an expression you recognize. It is the expression of someone who has information they are relieved to be able to pass to another person. She says a message came from the inner west wing at the 3rd watch. You say, which compound? She says, Consort Huang's household. You know the name. Consort Huang is one of the king's consorts, a woman in her mid-30s who has been in the palace for 11 years. She entered the palace at 24 through the Guangye selection process, the formal review by which the royal household identified women of appropriate lineage and bearing for the inner court. She is from a family of mid-level Yangban rank, educated, with connections to the Ministry of Rights through a distant uncle. She has 2 children, a son born in the 3rd year of her palace residence, who developed a fever in his 2nd month and died before the season changed, a daughter, now 7 years old, who lives in the Donggung household compound under the care of assigned court ladies and sees her mother on specified visiting days. You have read this history in the patient file. You have also read between the lines of it, because the patient file in the Neiyuan records medical events and social context simultaneously, and the context of a woman whose son died in infancy and whose daughter lives apart from her in a separate compound, is a context that produces certain clinical patterns over time. Consort Huang's file shows recurring digestive complaints over the past 3 years, mild but persistent. Formulas prescribed, symptoms temporarily resolved, symptoms returning. The pattern of someone whose body is expressing something that changes in presentation but not in origin. Her position in the inner court hierarchy is mid-level, above the newer consorts, below the most senior ones. She has not produced a living male heir, which is the primary measure of a consort's standing. She has maintained her position through other qualities: competence in court ritual, a reputation for discretion, the kind of steadiness that palace life requires, and that not every woman who enters these walls develops. You have not treated her recently. The last entry in her file is 8 months ago, a standard seasonal health assessment. She was in good condition at that assessment. Pulse moderate and even, no acute complaints, tongue normal. You say, what was the message? Physician Yoon says, acute abdominal pain onset at the second watch, vomiting. The household attendants were managing it until the third watch when she lost consciousness briefly. They sent then. You say, briefly. She says they describe it as perhaps 1 minute. She was responsive again when the messenger left the compound. You say, what did you send? She says, I sent Physician Choi with a stabilizing formula, ginger and licorice base, and instructions to assess and report. He is there now. You say, I am going. She says, I thought you would. You pick up your case. You add 3 extra items: a packet of prepared aconite in a measured therapeutic dose, because unexplained acute abdominal pain with vomiting and loss of consciousness is a pattern that can progress quickly, and you want the option available: a packet of processed rhubarb root, which moves obstruction in the digestive tract and can address several of the conditions on your differential. A set of the fine gauge needles, thinner than your standard acupuncture needles, used for emergency presentations where you need to act quickly at specific points. You walk fast through the inner palace. The inner palace at this hour is dark and quiet in the way of a place where most people are asleep, but it is not empty. The guards are at their stations. The kitchen fires are banked but tended. A servant moves across the far end of the courtyard with a lamp, destination unknown. The palace never entirely stops. It shifts into a lower register at night, a slower rhythm, but the machinery of it continues. Consort Huang's compound is in the west section of the inner palace, past the queen's household and through a gate that requires a night access pass. You have one. Every physician in the Nayuan carries a night access pass for the inner palace, because illness does not observe the gate schedules. You show the pass. You go in. The compound is lit with lamps at every corner, more than normal. Someone made the decision to light the compound fully when the situation developed, which tells you the household understood this was serious. Physician Choi meets you at the inner gate. He is a junior male physician, 2 years into his palace appointment, with the expression of someone whose training did not fully prepare him for the thing he has just witnessed. He says she is conscious and responsive. The vomiting stopped about 20 minutes ago. The pain is ongoing, concentrated in the upper and middle abdomen. Her pulse is rapid and thin. The tongue is dry. She is cold to the touch but sweating. You say cold and sweating simultaneously. He says yes. You say, has she eaten or drunk anything in the last 4 hours? He says, the attendants say she ate the evening meal at the standard hour and nothing after. You say, what was in the evening meal? He pauses. He says, I did not ask. You say, find out exactly what she ate, exactly what she drank, exactly what time. I want the list before I leave this compound. He nods and goes. You go into the inner room. Consort Huang is lying on her sleeping pallet, covered to the shoulders with a quilted blanket. She is a woman of middle height, with a composed face that is currently not composed at all. She is pale in a way that goes beyond the normal paleness of illness, a grayish pallor that sits under the skin rather than on it. She is sweating despite the cold of the room, which is cooler than you expected, the braziers burning low. You kneel beside her. You say, I am the physician from the Niowan. Tell me about the pain. She opens her eyes. She says, it started as cramping, in the middle. Then it moved up, here, and she gestures toward the upper left quadrant of her abdomen. Then the vomiting. You say, when you fainted, did you have any warning, any sensation before you lost consciousness? She says, I felt very cold. Then I was gone. Then I was back, and the attendant was beside me. You take her pulse. It is rapid and thin, exactly as Physician Choi described. There is a quality in it that you do not like, a quality the texts call scattered, which means the rate is fast, but the force is irregular, the pulse arriving with uneven strength from one beat to the next. A scattered pulse in the context of acute abdominal pain and vomiting and transient loss of consciousness is a serious finding. You press lightly on the upper abdomen. She inhales sharply. The tenderness is real and significant. The location is the epigastric region, the area between the navel and the breastbone, with additional tenderness in the left upper quadrant. You look at her tongue, dry and pale at the center, slightly red at the edges. You think through the differential, food poisoning, which is the most common cause of acute vomiting with abdominal pain. But food poisoning rarely causes this degree of paleness and scattered pulse, obstruction, which would typically produce more distension of the abdomen, which you do not see. Something originating in the stomach or the upper digestive system, or something else. You keep your expression level. You say, how are you feeling right now compared to 1 hour ago? She says, worse. The pain is not improving. You say, I am going to place 2 needles at emergency stabilizing points. They will not eliminate the pain, but they will address the pulse irregularity. Then I will prepare a formula. She nods. You place the needle at pericardium 6, the inner gate, which stabilizes the cardiac rhythm and addresses vomiting. You place the second needle at stomach 36, the leg 3 miles point, which is the classical emergency point for digestive crisis, the point that tonifies the stomach key and can pull a patient back from a deteriorating trajectory. You watch her face for 2 minutes after placement. The scattered quality of the pulse does not resolve, but it does not worsen. Physician Choi returns. He has a list written on a slip of paper, in a fast, slightly uneven hand. He says, "The evening meal, rice, soup with dried pollock and radish, stir-fried fernbrake, preserved cabbage kimchi, a sweet rice drink, sikye, sent from the kitchen at the king's order for distribution to all inner palace households this evening." You look at the list. You say the sikye. Was it distributed to all households? He says, "That is what the attendant said." You say, "Find out if anyone else in the palace is ill tonight. Send a message to every compound that received the sikye distribution. I want to know within the hour." He looks at you. He understands what you are asking. He says, "I will go now." He leaves. You look at the list again. Sikye is a traditional sweet rice drink made by fermenting cooked rice with malt barley water. It is mildly sweet and slightly effervescent. It is a common palace beverage, particularly in winter, when it is served warm. The king sometimes orders special distributions of palace kitchen preparations to the inner court households as a gesture. The drink itself is not dangerous, but the drink is the single variable that differentiates tonight's meal from any other evening meal in this household. You do not know yet if anyone else is ill. You will know within the hour. You prepare the formula at the small brazier in the corner of the room. You work from the materials in your case: ginger root for the stomach and the vomiting, coptis root in a small quantity for the heat signs at the tongue edges, prepared licorice to harmonize the formula, and a small addition of aquileria wood, which descends the rebellious stomach key that is producing the vomiting. You watch the decoction on the heat. Consort Wang is lying with her eyes partially closed, not sleeping, somewhere in the suspended state of someone in significant pain who is doing the work of managing it. You say, "The formula will be ready in 15 minutes. The needle points should be giving you some ease in the stomach by now." She says, "A little." She says, "Is this serious?" You consider how to answer this. You say, "You are being well attended. I want to see how the formula performs before I give you a fuller assessment." She looks at you. She is not a woman who is easily managed with partial answers. You can see this in the directness of her gaze, even through the pain. She says, "Tell me what you think." You say, "The pulse pattern concerns me. It may be a reaction to the pain. I want to see if it stabilizes with the treatment." She says, "And if it does not?" You say, "Then we address what comes next when it comes." She holds your gaze for a moment. Then she closes her eyes. Physician Choi returns in 40 minutes, not 1 hour. He is breathing harder than normal, which means he moved faster than his usual pace through the palace. He says 2 other compounds reported illness, both mild, nausea only, no vomiting, no loss of consciousness, both in households that received the sikye. You say, "Which compounds?" He names them. They are in the outer inner palace household area, lower status residences. You say, "Consort Huang's compound received the same distribution?" He says, "Yes." You say, "Was the sikye prepared in the saragan?" He says, "Yes, the standard royal kitchen." You are quiet for a moment. You look at Consort Huang, who has been listening. She is watching you. You say, the distribution may have been spoiled in some way. Secrecy is a fermented drink, and it can develop additional fermentation if it is stored at the wrong temperature or distributed too late in its preparation cycle. This would explain the variation in severity. A smaller quantity consumed, milder symptoms. A larger quantity, more severe. This is the most likely explanation. You believe this explanation. You also note, in the part of your mind that records what is not written down, that Consort Huang's symptoms are significantly more severe than the two other reported cases. You note the scattered pulse. You note the transient loss of consciousness. You note the left upper quadrant tenderness, which is more pronounced than simple gastric upset typically produces. You note all of this. You say to Physician Choi, I want the secrecy preparation recorded. Time of preparation, time of distribution, preparation staff. Write it as a spoilage inquiry and submit it to the bureau director in the morning. Do not use any other language. He says, understood. You say, stay with her while I reassess. You take the pulse again. The scattered quality is slightly reduced. The rate is still elevated, but less dramatically so. The needle points are holding. You strain the formula and cool it to the correct temperature. You help her drink it, slowly, in small portions, because a stomach that has been vomiting needs to receive medicine gradually, or it will simply reject it again. She drinks. She keeps it down. You stay with her for another hour. During that hour, the pulse continues to settle. The scattered quality diminishes further. By the end of the hour, the pulse is rapid but no longer irregular in the way that concerned you most. The pain in the upper abdomen is still present but less sharp. She reports it as a dull ache rather than the acute cramping of earlier. She falls into a light sleep. You do not leave. You sit in the corner of the room, your case on the floor beside you, and you watch her breathe. Her breathing is even. The color has returned slightly to her face. The grayish undertone is less pronounced. You think about the secrecy. You think about the palace kitchen, which you know well, which you have observed many times, which operates under a system of checks that is comprehensive and yet, as you have thought before, not complete. You think about the nature of fermentation and the temperatures at which it accelerates and what happens when a prepared drink sits too long at an improperly warm storage temperature before distribution. You think about the difference between this explanation and another explanation. You are a physician. Your obligation is to treat what is in front of you and to document what you observe and to submit the spoilage inquiry and to wait for the morning and for the bureau director and for whatever investigation follows. This is what you will do. You know the history of what happens when a physician in this system speculates beyond the clinical evidence. The case records in the restricted archive contain references to physicians who made accusations that were unsubstantiated. The outcomes were not favorable to the physicians. A court physician who steps outside the clinical frame and into the political one without evidence is a court physician who has misunderstood their role, and misunderstanding your role in this palace carries consequences that are not abstract. You understand your role. You will treat the patient. You will document the clinical findings. You will submit the spoilage inquiry. You will carry the rest in the place where you carry things that have no protocol. You sit in the corner of the room. Outside, the palace is at its quietest. The third watch has passed. The fourth watch is approaching. In an hour, the sky will begin to change. You check the pulse one more time. Moderate and even. The crisis has passed. You write your case note in the low lamplight of the corner. Acute gastric episode. Probable dietary cause. Formula administered. Acupuncture at stabilizing points. Pulse stabilized over 2 hours of observation. Patient sleeping. Follow-up required morning of next day. Spollage inquiry submitted. You write the note carefully. Every word of it is true. You put the note in the case. You sit for a few more minutes. Then you rise silently and bow to the sleeping woman and go back out into the corridor and into the cold dark of the palace before dawn, and walk back to the Neiwan through the empty paths with your breath making small clouds in the lamplight and your mind very quiet and very awake. Physician Yoon is still at her station. She looks up. She says, "Stable?" You say, "Stable." The pulse settled. She is sleeping. She says, "What was it?" You say, "The Sikia distribution. Probable spoilage. 2 other households reported mild symptoms." She writes in the night log. You sit at your station. You have 1 hour before the dawn preparation begins. You do not sleep. You take out the reference text on gastric emergencies and read the section on toxic presentations in the classical system, not because you need to, because reading is the thing you do when you need your mind to be occupied with something clear and bounded and outside the space where the other thoughts are waiting. The text is precise and detailed and more than 200 years old, and it does not resolve the things you are not writing down. But it occupies the hour. And when the bell marks the 4th watch and Physician Yoon finishes her log and goes to her quarters, and the first of the morning physicians begins to arrive in the preparation room, you are already at your station with the first formula of the day ground and measured and the brazier at temperature. You begin. The morning after a difficult night in this work is the same as any other morning. The schedule does not adjust for what happened in the dark. The cases that were on the list yesterday are still on the list today. This is one of the properties of this work that your training prepared you for explicitly. The bureau director who oversaw your 3rd year of training said it plainly in the final assessment session before you were assigned to the palace. He said, "A physician who requires the world to slow down after a hard night will find that the world does not comply. You will develop the capacity to hold a difficult night in one hand and a new morning in the other. This is not callousness. It is the difference between a physician and a person who is merely sympathetic. You have thought about that distinction many times. You think about it now, walking through the preparation room toward your station. The case from last night in your hand, the smell of the room the same as every other morning, herbs and coal smoke and silver needles in their bamboo tube. You set the case down. You open it. The Crown Prince needs a follow-up assessment. His cough is residual, but the formula should be tapering now toward a lighter maintenance preparation. The consort in the East Wing needs her daily formula. The Queen Dowager's 2nd acupuncture treatment is this afternoon. Consort Huang needs a morning visit to confirm the stability of last night's improvement. And somewhere in the bureau director's office, a spoilage inquiry will be sitting on the desk when he arrives. You prepare each formula in sequence. You do not speak much this morning. The other physicians give you the particular quiet that colleagues give each other after a night call, a brief acknowledgement that something happened and that you are still here and that the work continues. You accept this quiet. You work inside it. The light through the preparation room window moves from dark to gray to the pale, flat light of a winter morning, and with it comes the smell of the palace kitchen starting the first preparations of the day, and the distant sound of the gate rotations changing, and the sparrows, always the sparrows, indifferent to everything. You finish the last formula. You pick up your case. You step out into the corridor. The morning is cold, and the sky is the color of old silver, and the paths of the inner palace are as clean and ordered as they are every morning, swept before you arrived, ready for whatever the day brings. You walk toward the Donggung. You carry the case and the log and the things that are written in it and the things that are not, and you walk at your normal pace, which is not slow and not hurried, the pace of someone who has learned exactly how much time the distances in this palace require and has adjusted accordingly. The day is already underway. You are already inside it. You move through the inner palace with the particular fluency of someone who has learned its grammar over 7 years, who knows which path is faster in the morning versus the afternoon, who knows which guards will wave you through, and which will require a full credential check regardless of how often they have seen your face. You know this place. Not the way the kings and queens know it, not the way the ministers know it, not the way the historians will eventually know it when they read the archives. You know it the way the stones know it. From the inside, from below, from the level of the work that holds everything else up. You walk on. The night duty rotation comes to you once every 8 days. It is written into the Neuinyeo schedule at the beginning of each month, distributed in the official roster that is posted on the wall beside the preparation room door. Your name appears in the rotation the same as every other physician's name, once per 8 days, from the second watch to the fourth, the hours when the palace is at its most still and the work is largely waiting. Tonight is your night. You knew it was coming. You arranged your day accordingly. Lighter afternoon rounds, the Queen Dowager's acupuncture treatment moved to the morning. Consort Huang's follow-up completed before the hour of the monkey. By the time the evening meal arrives from the kitchen distribution, you have cleared most of tomorrow's preparation work as well, grinding and measuring the formulas that the morning shift will administer, leaving only the final decoction steps which must be done fresh. You eat slowly. You allow yourself this on night duty evenings. You eat without the case open in front of you. You eat looking at the small window of your quarters, which shows a rectangle of sky that is, tonight, deeply clear, the winter stars visible through the cold. The stars above the palace are the same stars above the rest of the kingdom. You know this, and yet the palace view of them has its own character, framed by roof tiles and boundary walls, contained within the geometry of a place designed to contain everything. You finish eating. You wash your hands. You go to the Neuinyeo for the handoff. Physician Im is finishing his evening notes when you arrive. He is the last of the day shift physicians still in the building, a habit of his that the other physicians have long since accepted as part of his character. He does not leave until the log is current and the preparation room is in order for the morning. He looks up. He says, "Quiet today." You say, "Consort Huang is stable." The follow-up pulse was even. She is taking the formula without difficulty. He says, "Good." The bureau director reviewed the spoilage inquiry this afternoon. You say, "And?" He says, "The Surigan staff confirmed the sikye was held at preparation temperature for longer than the standard interval before distribution. The head cook has submitted a corrective protocol. The director accepted it." You say, "The other households that reported symptoms." He says, "Both fully recovered. No further cases." You say, "Good." He looks at you for a moment. He says, "You did well that night." You say nothing. He says, "I mean the clinical management, the pulse assessment, the formula choices, and sending Physician Choi for the distribution records. That was correct." You say, "The records were relevant to the diagnosis." He says yes. He closes the log. He says, "The night schedule is light. 3 check-ins. The Queen Dowager at the 2nd watch, the Crown Prince at the 3rd, and the East Wing Consorts formula should be confirmed delivered before you begin." You say, "I will confirm it now." He picks up his outer robe. He says, "You know where I am if something changes." You say yes. He goes. You are alone in the Neiwan. This is one of the particular qualities of night duty that you have learned to value in a way you did not expect when you first took the rotation 7 years ago. During the day, the building is never empty. There is always movement, always voices, always someone at the next station. The day has a continuous texture of other people's presence that you have grown so accustomed to that you no longer notice it except in its absence. At night, the building exhales. You go to the preparation room. The room at night is the same room it is during the day and entirely different. The grinding stones are still. The braziers are banked to holding embers. The measuring cups are cleaned and stacked in their designated order on the shelf. The reference texts are in their places. You check the delivery log for the East Wing Consorts formula. It was delivered at the hour of the dog, the evening distribution. Confirmed received. You make a note. You go to your station. You sit. The silence of the Neiwan at the 2nd watch is a layered silence. Within it you can hear the building settling in the cold, the small sounds of wood and stone contracting as the temperature drops through the night. You can hear, faintly, the guard rotation at the outer gate, the distant exchange of calls. You can hear, from somewhere in the north section of the outer compound, the sound of wind moving through the space between 2 buildings. You open your case log. You write the evening check-in entries. Crown Prince, residual cough, formula tapering to maintenance level, no fever for 4 days. Stable. East Wing Consort, bleeding resolved, formula transitioning to tonification phase, pulse assessment scheduled for 2 days, improving. Queen Dowager, 2 acupuncture treatments completed, heart rhythm slightly more regular than initial assessment, joint pain management ongoing. Managing. Concert Huang. Acute episode resolved. Follow-up pulse even. Dietary cause confirmed by bureau inquiry. Recovering. You look at the 4 entries. 4 women and 1 boy in different compounds across this palace, at different stages of conditions that range from the ordinary to the serious. You hold all of them simultaneously, in the way that physicians hold their caseload, not as a weight on top of the daily work, but woven into it, present in the background of every other task. You close the log. You pick up the reference text you have been working through this week, the euinyeo, the classified collection of medical prescriptions assembled by Royal Commission a century ago. It is the largest medical compilation in the kingdom's history, organized into 365 volumes covering every category of illness and treatment the royal physicians of that era could document. You are not reading all 365 volumes. You are in the pharmacology section, which catalogs hundreds of medicinal substances organized by their classical properties: nature, flavor, meridian affinities, primary indications, dosage, preparation, and contraindications. You know most of this volume by heart. You still read it. Your teacher told you to read it once a year, every year, for the length of your career. She said, you will find different things each time, not because the text changes, because you change. Each year you bring a different set of cases, a different set of questions, a different set of mistakes you have made and learned from, and the text will speak to those things if you let it. You have found this to be true. Tonight you are in the section on mineral substances, the metallic and stone preparations that the classical system uses for conditions the herbal preparations cannot fully address. Cinnabar, which is mercury sulfide, used in small quantities for calming the spirit and stabilizing the heart. Magnetite, used for anchoring the yang energy that tends to rise inappropriately in older patients, which is relevant to the Queen Dowager's case. Oyster shell, which calms the liver and anchors the floating yang. You read about magnetite. The text describes its properties as heavy and sinking, its nature as cold, its taste as acrid. It enters the kidney and liver meridians. Its primary indication is the rising of liver yang, producing dizziness, tinnitus, and palpitations in patients with underlying kidney deficiency. The Queen Dowager has tinnitus. She mentioned it briefly in the second treatment session, a ringing in the left ear that has been present for about 4 months. She described it as mild and intermittent and not her primary concern, but you wrote it down. You write everything down, at least in your private log. Tinnitus, in the context of kidney deficiency and liver yang rising, is a classical triad. You think about adding magnetite to her formula in a small quantity. You make a note. The water clock on the wall marks the second watch. You put on your outer robe and pick up the night visit case, a smaller version of your day case with the essentials only, and go out into the cold. The inner palace at the second watch is very quiet. The lanterns along the main paths are lit, but the side paths are dark, and you navigate them by the familiar sequence of turns and landmarks that you have memorized over 9 years of palace appointments. The Daibijan is lit. The Queen Dowager does not sleep as much as she once did. You know this from the attendants, who have mentioned it in the context of her night symptoms, the palpitations that come in the dark, the difficulty returning to sleep when they wake her. Older patients with kidney deficiency often experience this. The yin that should anchor the spirit through the night is insufficient, and the spirit, unanchored, drifts. The senior court lady meets you at the gate. She leads you to the inner room. The Queen Dowager is sitting upright, which confirms she has not been sleeping. She is in her informal night robe, with a heavy quilt over her shoulders. A brazier burns beside her, and the room is warm. She looks at you when you enter. She says, "The ear is noisy tonight." You say, "I have been reading about that. I would like to add something to your formula, an ingredient that addresses the sound in the ear and also supports the heart rhythm." She says, "What is it?" You say magnetite, a mineral preparation, heavy and cold in nature. It anchors what is rising too high. She considers this. She says, "Heavy and cold. I feel cold enough already." You say, "I will balance it with warming agents. The net effect will not be cold. The heaviness is the therapeutic quality. It brings things down that are floating upward." She says, "Like the sound." You say, "Like the sound, and like the pulse irregularity in part. They come from the same source in classical theory." She is quiet. She says, "You think carefully." You say, "I try to." She says, "Sit for a moment." You sit. She looks at the brazier. She says, "I have been thinking about what you told me, that the chi pulse is thin." You say, "Yes." She says, "I have been in this palace for 51 years. I came here at 17. I have outlasted 4 senior court ladies, 2 royal physicians, 1 king, and 3 of my own children." You say nothing. She says, "I am not afraid of the thin pulse. I want you to know that." You say, "I understand." She says, "I am only managing the timeline carefully. There are things that need to happen before other things can happen." You say, "I understand." She says, "You are young." You say, 24. She says, "I was 24 when my second child was born. I thought I understood the palace then. I did not." She pauses. She says, "You understand it better than I did at your age. I can see that." You say, "I only understand my part of it." She says, "Your part is not small." She looks at the brazier again. She says, "Go and rest. The night is cold, and you have more watch rounds." You bow. You stand. She says, as you reach the door, "Add the magnetite. I trust your thinking." You bow again. You go back out into the cold. The Crown Prince's compound at the 3rd watch is quieter than the Debijan. The guards at the gate check your credentials and admit you without incident. Steward Choi is awake and waiting in the outer room, which is his habit on nights when there is a physician scheduled. He says, "He slept well tonight. Cough is almost gone." You say, "Pulse." He says, "I checked it myself, as you showed me. Even and moderate, not fast." You have spent 2 weeks teaching Steward Choi how to assess the basic pulse qualities. Not the full classical assessment, not the fine distinctions between the 6 positions, but the fundamental distinction between fast and moderate, strong and weak, even and scattered. It is not clinical training. It is the practical knowledge of a caregiver who needs to know when to send for a physician in the night. He is a good student. You say good. The formula will move to a lighter maintenance preparation starting tomorrow. Less buplerum, more qi tonification. He should be able to resume full study sessions. Steward Choi says, he asked about you again. You say, what did he ask? He says, he asked if the physician who treated him during the fever was the same physician who has been treating him throughout. He said the way the illness was handled was different from how he has been treated before. More responsive, he said. You think about this. He is 14 years old, and he is describing the quality of his medical care as more responsive. You say, tell him his physician has been consistent throughout, and tell him that the responsiveness is the standard the Bureau expects. Steward Choi says, I will tell him. He pauses. He says, he is a thoughtful boy. You say yes. You bow. You go back out through the Donggong gate. The walk back to the Neiyuan takes you through the center of the inner palace, along the main path that runs from the residential compounds toward the great administrative halls. The halls are dark at this hour. The Gunjeongjun, the hall of diligent governance, dark and empty. Its doors closed, its throne inside unseen. By morning the king will sit on that throne, and the ministers will arrange themselves in their 2 rows, and the machinery of governance will proceed. But for now the hall is dark, and the path is quiet, and the night air is very cold and very clear. You stop for a moment. This is something you do not usually do. The night rounds have a pace, and the pace does not include stopping. But tonight you stop on the main path in the dark between 2 lanterns, and you look up. The sky above the inner palace is extraordinary on a clear winter night. The palace walls block the light from the city beyond, and the palace itself uses only what lanterns are necessary, and so the darkness overhead is real darkness, and the stars in it are real stars, the same stars that sailors use to navigate, the same stars that astronomers have been charting in this kingdom since before the dynasty was founded. The observatory on the hill north of the city has been recording stellar observations since 1395. The 3rd year of the dynasty. The records are continuous. They include observations of comets, of eclipses, of meteor showers, of the positions of the planets against the fixed stars, of everything the sky has offered to observers who are paying attention. You are paying attention. You are very cold. You stand in the dark for perhaps 2 minutes. Looking at the stars through the clear air above the palace roof tiles, and then you put your head down against the wind and walk back to the Neiyuan. The preparation room is warm when you return. You add a small amount of coal to the brazier under the holding pot and watch the embers catch. You sit at your station. You review tomorrow's schedule. It is a full day, the Queen Dowager's 3rd treatment, Consort Huang's 2nd follow-up, the Princess's formula refill and a progress check on her menstrual pattern, the Crown Prince's transition to maintenance formula, the East Wing Consort's tonification phase assessment, 3 monitoring visits in the outer household compounds. A full day. You close the schedule. You pick up the Yubang Yuchui and continue reading. The text moves from magnetite to dragon bone. which is the fossilized remains of large prehistoric mammals ground into powder, used in classical medicine for calming the spirit and stabilizing the heart. The text describes its properties as sweet and astringent, its nature as slightly cold. Its meridian affinities cover the heart, liver, and kidney. You read slowly. The preparation room is warm and quiet. The water clock drips its steady measure of time. Outside, the wind is lower now than it was at the beginning of the night. The buildings have stopped creaking. The cold has settled into a steadiness, the deep cold of the middle of winter that arrives after midnight and holds until dawn. You turn a page. You read about oyster shell. Its properties are salty and astringent, its nature slightly cold. It enters the liver and kidney meridians. Its primary use is for the rising of liver yang, for the symptoms of restlessness and insomnia and tinnitus in patients with underlying deficiency. When combined with magnetite, the two substances work together, both anchoring, both descending, both addressing the problem of energy that has lost its mooring and is floating upward when it should be rooted below. You think about the Queen Dowager. You think about the chi pulse, thin but present. You think about what she said, "I am not afraid of the thin pulse." You believe her. You have treated many patients in 7 years in this palace, and across all of them you have developed a sense of which ones are telling the truth when they describe their relationship to their own condition. The Queen Dowager is telling the truth. She is not frightened of what is coming. She is managing it the way she has managed everything in 51 years inside these walls, with attention and precision and a willingness to look directly at the thing in front of her. You write the note to add magnetite and oyster shell to her formula, combined in a ratio you calculate from the text and from the details of her presentation. You set the note in tomorrow's preparation tray. The water clock marks the 4th watch. Dawn is coming. You can feel it before you can see it, in the quality of the silence, which shifts slightly as the night begins its transition toward morning. The absolute quiet of the deep night gives way, gradually, to something that is still quiet but anticipatory, the world on the edge of beginning. You close the reference text. You stand. You stretch your hands, which have been holding the text and the brush, and are cold at the tips despite the brazier. You warm them against the sides of the clay holding pot and feel the heat move into your fingers. Outside the small window of the preparation room, the sky is dark. But in the east, at the very edge of the darkness, there is the first suggestion of something. Not light, not yet. A slight thinning of the dark. A quality of imminence that you have learned to recognize from years of pre-dawn mornings. The palace is about to wake. It will wake as it always wakes, in the ordered sequence that governs this institution. The kitchen fires first, stoked from their banked embers to full heat. Then the servant rotations, the sweeping of the main paths, the filling of the water basins. Then the guard changes at the outer gates. Then the bell marking the dawn. And then you, at your station, with the day's formulas ground and measured, with the case log open, with the carrying cases lined up in the east wall tray. You have been here for 7 years. You were 12 when they came for you with their papers and their lists and their assessments. You are 24 now, and you know this palace the way you know a patient whose condition you have been managing across many seasons, with the kind of knowledge that is not dramatic and not romantic, but is real, the knowledge of patterns and rhythms and the small deviations that matter and the large presentations that sometimes deceive. You know which pulse in which season means what. You know which formula is correct for which combination of tongue and pulse and history. You know which court ladies are frightened, and which are steady, and which are managing something they cannot name to anyone except you. You know which boy is paying attention to his own treatment, even though no one has told him he is allowed to. You know which old woman is not afraid of her thin pulse. You know the sound the grinding stone makes on a cold morning when the stone itself has not yet warmed. You know the smell of the preparation room before the other physicians arrive. That combination of dried herbs and coal smoke and silver needles that is the smell of your working life. The smell of the inside of the thing you spend your days doing. You go to your station. You begin the first formula of the day. The grinding stone is cold under your palm. You push it forward. Outside, somewhere in the palace, a single bird calls. Then another. Then the sound of the kitchen gate. The first sound of the day's machinery beginning. The stone moves forward and back. The herbs release their smell into the warm air of the room. The sky through the window is lighter than it was an hour ago. Not light. Not yet. But coming. You work in the quiet before the day arrives, the same way you worked yesterday and the day before, in the space between one thing and the next, the space where the palace is not yet demanding anything, and the work is simply the work, the grinding and the measuring and the preparation of the things that go between a body and its difficulties. The mortar moves forward. The stone is warming under your hand now. The preparation room holds the warmth of the brazier and the warmth of the work and the warmth of 7 years of mornings like this one, accumulated in the walls and the floors and the air of the room. Your hands are warm. Your hands are always warm by this point in the morning. You measure the powder. You level the surface. You set it aside. The sky outside is the color of the hour before dawn, a pale gray that holds the night and the morning at the same time, belonging completely to neither, a color that exists only in this interval. You have seen it hundreds of times. You look at it now. The bird calls again, closer this time. You breathe. The stone moves forward. The palace wakes around you, slowly, in its ordered sequence, the fires and the bells and the gates, and you are already inside the day before the day has named itself, already working, already here, already part of the particular machinery of this place that holds so many lives in its careful, intricate, demanding, unending structure. The light comes. Slowly. The way it always comes. You keep grinding. The herbs are ready when you need them. They are always ready. You are always ready. The palace opens its eyes. If you have been listening to this story, thank you. If it found you somewhere quiet or helped the night move more slowly, That is everything we could want. Please consider leaving a like or subscribing to Quiet History at Bedtime. It helps more than you know. Sleep well.